Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Ashley Scott. Ashley, born on November 4, 1978, in Bossier City, Louisiana, is a kind-hearted individual. Her parents divorced while she was still in her mother's womb. However, her mother, Donna, later married Jimmy, who adopted she and loved her greatly. Jimmy had a biological daughter named Kia from a previous relationship. Unfortunately, Jimmy and Donna's marriage ended in divorce a few years later, primarily because Donna chose to leave. Ashley decided to stay with her father, Donna, but she continued to maintain a relationship with her mother. Even though Ashley's parents are divorced, she enjoyed a happy childhood. She was known for her kindness and obedience, and those around her recognized her beauty and potential. In 1996, she graduated from high school and went on to attend UAA Baptist University in Arkansas. There, she met her first love, Jeffrey Scott, who had also enrolled at the same university. Jeffrey was captivated by her beauty and warm smile, and soon they began dating. They are a beautiful couple, often holding hands and enjoying time together. Ashley's friends admired her and believed she had found a wonderful partner, as she often shared stories about how sweet and kind Jeffrey was and how fortunate she felt to be with him. In 2000, Ashley received the college degree she had always dreamed of. She pursued her dream of becoming a teacher and dedicated her life to education. However, her wedding to Jeffrey on June 9, 2001, was marred by some hidden problems. Although it appeared to be a joyous occasion on the surface, but some disturbing aspects of Jeffrey were apparent to everyone, and Ashley knew about them but chose to ignore them. A year prior to the wedding, Ashley had written to her sister, stating that she could no longer maintain communication with the family and requested they respect her choice. As a result, her family was not invited to the wedding. Ashley's friends were surprised to see that most of the guests were from Jeffrey's family, even though Ashley's family is very close and large. Initially puzzled, they later understood the situation. Her family disapproved of Jeffrey, and he made no effort to win them over. Underneath his friendly exterior, he often speaks ill of her family and acts inappropriately. Jeffrey offended those close to Ashley and believed he had every right to do so. What was most surprising was Ashley's reaction. It seemed like she was making excuses for his behavior. At the wedding, Jeffrey insulted some of her friends again and acted arrogantly. After they moved to Cordova, a suburb of Memphis, Tennessee, Ashley's relationships with many people began to deteriorate. The darker side of Jeffrey started to show. After the move, he began working as a computer systems technician at his father's company, while Ashley became an English teacher at a middle school. Everyone praised her. She was seen as beautiful, cheerful, intelligent, and sociable. She loved her job and her students. Paul Dealey, a colleague, later described her as an experienced teacher. He mentioned in court that she was the main reason he looked forward to going to English class each day. He admits that school was the only place she felt safe and loved. It was where she could escape from Jeffrey. As time went on, the relationship between Ashley and Jeffrey worsened, and her connection with her family nearly fell apart. She refused to discuss it, claiming it was her personal choice. These were certainly influenced by her husband Jeffrey, who was a master manipulator. In the early years of their marriage, he completely controlled her and isolated her. His constant criticism, even on trivial matters, hurt her self-esteem. He tried to control she in every way possible. During this time, she only communicated with a few people, including her childhood friend, Lori. They had been friends since 5th grade and remained in touch into adulthood. In September 2006, Ashley attended a school reunion that she was excited about. While the others at the event didn't notice anything unusual about her, Lori was worried throughout the evening. Jeffrey kept calling Ashley, making it impossible for her to relax and enjoy the class reunion. He questioned her about who she was talking to, what she was wearing, what she was eating and drinking, and what conversations she was having. Essentially, he tried to control every aspect of her life. That night, Ashley confided in Lori about the nightmare she was experiencing and expressed that she couldn't continue living like this. She revealed that she was thinking about divorce and had even reached out to an attorney. Ashley also admitted that she knew about Jeffrey's affairs, including an affair with a colleague named Blair Brown, someone she used to be very close to. Over time, she had forgiven Blair, who had contacted her to reveal Jeffrey's true nature and how dangerous he could be. This class reunion became the last social event Ashley attended. After that, she was isolated for several weeks, and new bruises began to appear on her body. On November 23, 2006, at 3:46 p.m., a call was made to emergency services in Memphis, Tennessee. When 911 dispatcher answered, they were surprised by the calmness of the caller, Jeffrey Scott. He reported that his wife had passed out at 11:00 a.m., but a voice in the background said she might be dead. The dispatcher asked for clarification, and he stated that his wife had been breathing moments before, but now appeared to be dead. What was remarkable about the call was that Jeffrey did not appear distressed, his voice remaining calm throughout the conversation. Recognizing the possibility of a crime, the dispatcher immediately alerted the leadership, and police were dispatched to the scene. Within minutes of receiving a call, police arrived at the given address. Upon arrival, they were greeted by their host, Jeffrey. He then showed them to his wife's bedroom, Ashley. Inside, they found a man, Robert McGee, a friend of Jeffrey's, was performing CPR on Ashley. Dr. Robert informed the police that she was still alive, but her health condition was critical, with her pulse and blood pressure being very low. Upon closer inspection, medical responders found evidence of severe trauma. Ashley had suffered a head injury, likely caused by a blunt object. Her condition was dire. Her pupils were dilated and unresponsive to light. She also had bleeding from her mouth and nose, and many bruises. Scratches appeared all over her body, especially on her legs, chest, and back. The medical team attempted emergency resuscitation. They inserted a breathing tube, used a defibrillator, and administered medication to stimulate her heart. Unfortunately, all of these methods failed. Jeffrey was in critical condition and close to death. She was eventually taken to the hospital, and a neurosurgeon was called in to assess her condition. The neurosurgeon's assessment confirmed the medical team's initial diagnosis. Ashley's brain was no longer functioning due to severe damage. Doctors therefore decided to stop treatment to end her pain and disconnected her life support. She passed away shortly after. There was no doubt that Ashley had been brutally murdered. Her right ear was green, a sign often seen in people who were repeatedly hit in the same spot. A man's shoe print on her back suggested that someone had stamped or even jumped on her. Furthermore, her body showed multiple bruises at different stages of healing, indicating that she had suffered repeated abuse. Meanwhile, police were questioning two individuals, Dr. Robert and Jeffrey. Robert cooperated with the investigation, sharing what information he knew about the incident. He revealed that he had received a call from his friend Jeffrey at 2:30 p.m. He and Jeffrey had been friends since college and kept in touch occasionally. Jeffrey explained to he that Jeffrey and his wife had been drinking the night before, and afterward, she hadn't been feeling well. When she didn't wake up the next day, Jeffrey sought his help, although busy at the time, but he went to their house where he found Jeffrey next to Ashley, who showed no signs of life. Robert suspected that Jeffrey and Ashley had an argument and that something unfortunate had happened, which they wanted to keep quiet. That was why they contacted him. He was aware that they was facing difficulties and each reacted differently. Ashley had turned to alcohol as a means of relieving stress, while Jeffrey became angry and often lost control, hitting Ashley. When Robert examined Ashley, he realized that the situation was much more serious than he had initially thought. Unfortunately, Ashley had little chance of survival and required urgent medical attention immediately. So, he urged Jeffrey to call 911. Meanwhile, Robert analyzed the situation and thought that something much more serious had happened. He suspected that a crime had been planned. When speaking to the police, he admitted that he had deliberately kept Jeffrey at the scene to prevent him from escaping. Jeffrey remained completely emotionless throughout the entire ordeal. He appeared unconcerned about the fate of Ashley, the woman he once loved. When questioned by the police about what had happened, he explained that the previous night had ended in an argument. The reason for the fight was his discovery of the messages exchanged between his wife, Ashley, and another man, which led him to believe she was having an affair. Feeling betrayed, he admitted that he had beaten his wife once. Following the altercation, Ashley stumbled and fell due to her intoxication. According to Jeffrey, she faced severe alcoholism and often acted irrationally. He lost patience with her frequent tantrums. In a fit of anger, he asked her to leave the house. It was not uncommon for Ashley to sleep in the garage on such nights. The next morning, he found her still asleep in the garage and, feeling a pang of sympathy, carried her back into the house and laid her down on their bed. However, as the day went on, Ashley still hadn't woken up. Jeffrey realized something was wrong and attempted to revive her himself. He then called a friend named Robert, who was a doctor, to come to the house. However, the police did not believe his account. When they arrived, Ashley was covered in bruises from head to toe and had severe injuries to her face and head. Even if she had been drunk and fallen, she wouldn't have sustained such extensive injuries. It was evident that she had been assaulted. Jeffrey was arrested and charged with aggravated assault, and once the autopsy results were released, the charge was elevated to first-degree murder. The pathologist's report revealed that Ashley died from a subdural hematoma on the right side of her brain. Such injuries occur from a significant blow to the head, causing the brain to collide with the skull, which leads to severe bleeding and swelling that cuts off the oxygen supply. This process causes parts of the body to weaken, causing extreme pain. Tragically, she could have survived if help had arrived within the first few hours. Additionally, over 50 hematomas of varying colors and densities were found on her body, confirming that she had been repeatedly attacked. It's difficult to fathom the pain she experienced. The saddest thing is that the person who caused this pain was her husband, Jeffrey, the person who was supposed to protect her. After Jeffrey's arrest, detectives examined the crime scene and found signs of a struggle throughout the house. Items were scattered, furniture was turned over, and a broken vase was in the living room. On the kitchen table, near a laptop, are printed text messages between Ashley and her lover. These text messages support Jeffrey's testimony about the cause of the crime. In the garage, officers discovered bloodstains on the floor. Inside her car, they found women's clothing and personal items, including a handbag with her documents and passport. It seemed that she had been planning to escape, but did not succeed. Officers then interviewed family members and friends, uncovering unexpected details about their lives and the circumstances surrounding the incident. Unfortunately, Ashley is having a difficult time in her relationship with her husband, Jeffrey. From the very beginning, they believed that their relationship would turn out well. However, he quickly became abusive, making her life extremely miserable. Lori's testimony became very important to the investigation. Detectives were interested in what Ashley's family and friends had to say. Through their conversations, they gathered a lot of useful information. Lori also shared that just before Ashley's death, Jeffrey had called her multiple times to complain about his wife. He claimed that Ashley drank heavily, lost her balance, and frequently fell, which explained the bruises on her body. However, the next morning, Ashley would not remember these incidents and would blame Jeffrey instead. He believed that Ashley's increasing alcohol dependency was due to their mutual friend Blair, whom he accused of corrupting Ashley and turning her against him. Jeffrey also expressed that he no longer wanted children because he felt disgusted by Ashley after everything that had happened. He accused his wife of being unfaithful, lying, and struggling with alcoholism. However, Lori did not believe him and thought he was trying to excuse his own behavior. Eventually, Lori realized that Ashley was a victim of domestic violence and was in serious danger. After each of Jeffrey's calls, Lori would try to reach Ashley, but she never answered, which was unusual. The last time they met was shortly before the tragic incident. They went shopping together, but Ashley did not buy anything for herself and seemed sad and lost in thought. Lori attempted to discuss Ashley's marriage, but Ashley preferred not to ruin their time together and changed the subject. She just said she was ready for a divorce, but it made her very nervous. She knew Jeffrey very well and worried that she couldn't predict how he would react. The next testimony concerns Blair Brown, who is often mentioned when talking about Ashley's family. During her questioning, she admitted that she had been in a romantic relationship with Jeffrey in the past, which gave her insight into his uncontrollable fits of rage. It was noted that Blair and Ashley had rekindled their friendship about 6 months before the crime occurred. Blair felt sympathy for Ashley and offered her occasional support. She acknowledged that her relationship with Jeffrey was a mistake and apologized repeatedly for it. She and Ashley sometimes meet for drinks. Ashley often goes to her house to hide from Jeffrey. On one occasion, he found Ashley at her place and violently attacked Ashley's, hitting several times in the face and throwing Ashley's onto the street, showing no concern for she as a witness. Even though there have been such incidents, Ashley still justifies Jeffrey's actions. The trial of Jeffrey Scott started on January 13, 2009. The prosecution claimed that the crime was premeditated. Evidence showed that an argument between Jeffrey and his wife Ashley began in the living room, where a broken vase was discovered. The conflict becomes more serious as they move throughout the house, and Ashley endures violence in nearly every room. Bloodstains were found throughout the home. Ashley's divorce attorney testified for the prosecution, stating that she had met with Ashley the day before death. At that time, all the divorce paperwork was ready. Ashley only needed to pack her belongings and leave while Jeffrey was at work. The attorney advised Ashley to leave secretly, which explains the items and documents found in her car. However, Ashley chose not to follow this advice because she wanted to explain her decision to her husband, a choice that ultimately proved fatal. The attorney did everything she could to assist Ashley, even offering her services for a minimal fee. She said that Ashley had been drinking and quitting work to deal with her emotions related to her marriage. This shows that Ashley needs long-term support. To ensure Ashley's safety, they communicated in secret, as Jeffrey controlled all phone calls. They met in public places or used payphones for their conversations. Witnesses reported seeing scratches and bruises on Ashley, which she tried to hide with makeup. Some people knew the source of her injuries, but felt powerless to intervene. In their final report, medical examiners noted that Ashley had been frequently kicked. It appeared that Jeffrey had pushed her to the ground and stomped on her, leaving old bruises on her back and legs. The defense team for Jeffrey worked hard to have the charge reduced to a second-degree crime. The attorney tried to make Ashley look bad, portraying her as an alcoholic and emotionally unstable. Their strategy was to convince the jury that Jeffrey also had a difficult time in the marriage. They discredited she, who couldn't defend herself because she was deceased. It came to light that in 2005, Ashley had received a drunk driving fine. Meanwhile, Jeffrey said he wanted to save their marriage. He bought a new house and was ready to have children, while Ashley had and send intimate pictures to your lover. Regarding the crime, Jeffrey said that he lost control, realized that all his efforts were in vain, and that Ashley had found someone else. He expressed his regret to his wife's family, saying that he regretted the pain he caused them. He mourned her loss and prayed for her soul. However, during the trial, it was mentioned that after his arrest, he did not inquire about his wife's well-being. Instead, he simply wanted to know the outcome of a recent football game. His attorney have adopted controversial tactics, even arguing that Ashley's injuries were largely caused by seizures brought on by alcohol withdrawal. To support this claim, an independent expert was brought in. In response, the assistant county medical examiner was called to testify. He reviewed evidence from the autopsy, describing Ashley's injuries in detail and stressing that her cause of death could not have been a fall. The prosecutor said that the defense's claim that the crime was committed accidentally was unreasonable. It was evident that Ashley wanted to escape from Jeffrey, her abuser, but out of love for her husband, wished to end things peacefully. Meanwhile, Jeffrey attacked her and hitting her repeatedly. He understood that he was causing great suffering to his wife. He ultimately finished the attack in the garage, where she lost consciousness. He saw how badly she was hurt, but chose to ignore it and failed to call for medical help right away. The prosecutor maintained that he intended to kill his wife. However, a new clue suddenly appears. Investigators discover that Ashley actually wants to save her marriage. Evidence showed she was taking medication to become pregnant and had supported buying a new home. She might have felt so trapped in the toxic relationship that she couldn't envision life without Jeffrey. Nevertheless, she eventually made the choice to leave. It's possible she hoped to leave without causing a rift, waiting for her husband to promise he would change and that everything would be okay. Victims of abuse often hold on to such unrealistic hopes. On January 19, 2009, Jeffrey Scott was found guilty of a second-degree crime. Even the judge disagreed with the jury's verdict. He criticized the jury for having voted 12 yes and 1 no on the original charge. One juror did not believe Jeffrey was guilty. Under state law, a unanimous verdict is necessary for a first-degree conviction. Ashley's family was also devastated. Jeffrey will serve 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Many feel this punishment is insufficient for someone who tortured a woman for years, isolating her from others, brainwashing her, and making her believe that she and her family were unworthy of being in his life. Ashley's father remarked that it was the worst thing that had ever happened to him, expressing his love for his daughter and stating that if she had died of natural causes, he could have eventually accepted it. However, he expressed his pain when he realized that his daughter had died a cruel death caused by Jeffrey and that he would never accept it. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Sophia Urudia. The Urudia family lived in Canning Vale, a suburb of Perth with about 35,000 residents. The family included 7 members and a dog. The children were Isabel, the youngest at 3 years old, Sophia, who was 8, Ines, 11, and Gabriel, who was 14. The parents, though busy with work, maintained a close relationship with their children and treated them well. Josephine, the mother, was a loving and caring woman who worked hard to provide comfort for her family and managed the household. Caring for children from toddler to teenager is a challenging task because the needs of children at each stage are different. The father often had to go on business trips to Hong Kong, resulting in frequent absences from home. 8 years old Sophia Urudia, a girl attending a Catholic elementary school where she was loved by all her classmates and teachers. Sophia was well-mannered, naturally tactful, inquisitive. She helped her mother and took care of her younger sister. Sophia had many hobbies, including painting and dancing. Her uncle, who lived with them, often helped with the children and frequently took them on outings. On June 26, 2006, the kids eagerly await a trip to the mall. Little do they know that a dangerous force is also at work there. It was a regular weekday. The uncle picked up the children after school, and they went to the local shopping center, Leominster. It was a small shopping area, but it had everything local residents needed. 3 children were with their uncle, 14 years old Gabriel, 11 years old Ines, and 8 years old Sophia. During their walk, Sophia excitedly shared that she had been chosen to perform an interesting Indonesian dance. She was thrilled and proud, and her uncle and siblings praised her. While at the shopping center, Sophia needed to use the restroom and informed them at the checkout. Being familiar with the shopping center, her uncle allowed her to go alone while they finished unpacking and paying for their items. The restroom wasn't far, and Sophia ran off by herself. The uncle watched her until she entered the restroom, not realizing it would be the last time he saw her alive. After paying, they left the store and went to wait for Sophia outside the restroom, but she took longer than expected. Concerned, the uncle moved closer to call out to her, but there was no response. He didn't enter the women's restroom, so he sent Gabriel and Ines to check both the women's and men's restrooms. Ines knocked on the women's door, but there was no answer. Gabriel checked the men's restroom, but it was silent. They also tried the nearby disabled restroom, where they heard some noise, but a male voice responded that it was occupied, scaring them away. Worried, Gabriel and Ines thought Sophia might have exited through another door, possibly heading to a restaurant or becoming lost in the shopping center. Sophia's uncle waited in the hallway, while the rest searched for her around the shopping center. After 10 minutes, Gabriel couldn't wait any longer and went back to the toilets to call out to her, thinking she hadn't heard him. As he approached the disabled toilet, the door suddenly swung open. A tough-looking guy, about 20 years old, emerged. Their eyes met briefly, and Gabriel instinctively felt something was wrong. Gabriel immediately noticed Sophia's discarded school uniform in the waste bin. He moved closer and saw a lifeless, naked body on the floor. By then, the guy had already run down the corridor and was out of sight. Gabriel rushed to Sophia, but she showed no signs of life. He began to scream in the toilet. The uncle and the other children who were with Sophia at the mall that day quickly arrived at the scene. The police were called immediately, and mall security was notified. The entire mall was closed. Top doctors confirmed the girl's death. They couldn't save her. Forensic experts sealed the toilet and began examining the crime scene to ensure no important evidence was damaged or lost. Gabriel, who witnessed the criminal, was able to describe him, prompting police to search the mall for the suspicious man who had emerged from the handicapped restroom. During their initial search, the police could not locate him within the premises and assumed he had already escaped. The public was shocked by the brutal crime that had taken place. In what seemed like a safe, quiet place, no one imagined that letting a child go to the toilet could result in losing them forever. This murder would later be deemed the most brutal in Western Australia's history due to the horrific nature of the crime and Sophia's injuries. Unfortunately, the CCTV cameras in the corridor were not working that day. At the time, detectives only had a description provided by Gabriel, which was clearly insufficient. The crime was committed with horrifying brutality. The child, Sophia, died from suffocation. The attacker not only cut off her air supply but also squeezed her neck so forcefully that her larynx was completely crushed. Her arms were dislocated, and she suffered severe injuries and ruptures due to forced sexual assault. The forensic expert concluded that the attack lasted about 5 minutes, during which the attacker brutally harmed she. Even the most seasoned detectives, who regularly deal with various crimes, also described the case as the most serious they had ever encountered. Sophia had no reason to use the disabled toilet. It was possible that she was quickly dragged inside by someone. The criminal was probably already inside, waiting for a victim, and Sophia was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, becoming an unintended victim. She was seized so suddenly that she didn't have time to scream. The attacker immediately began strangling her. She stood no chance against an adult man and couldn't even call for help, even though her relatives were nearby and heard nothing. Investigators began compiling a list of all sex offenders in the area and questioned shopping center employees using a portrait of the suspect. It was urgent to find the criminal because panic was spreading throughout the city. People were terrified by the brutal attack on a young girl and were afraid to go outside. Several shopping center employees recognized the man in the portrait as 21 years old Dante Windamur. He is fat, looks very pale, and worked as a packer of vegetables and fruits at one of the stores in the shopping center. On the day of the incident, Dante was on shift but then disappeared. The police became interested in him and checked his criminal history. They discovered that 3 years prior to this murder, he had been arrested for sexually assaulting another 8-year-old girl. At that time, the police lacked sufficient evidence to charge him, so he was released. Early the next morning, around 5 o'clock, detectives, knowing Dante's address, went to his home, where he lived with his parents, just a short distance from the shopping center. They interrogated Dante and searched his residence. During the search, investigators discovered a sports bag containing latex gloves, handcuffs, rope, a knife, and several photographs with personal information. The oldest girl in the photos was 15 years old, and the others were younger. Some photos included details such as names, ages, home addresses, and the shortest routes to reach them using public transport, suggesting he was stalking these girls and planning attacks. However, Sophia was not among these photos. Within hours, Dante was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, as well as sexual assault and forcible detention of Sophia. Dante Windamur was born on August 8, 1984, in Western Australia. His family soon moved to the UK, where they lived for 8 years before returning to Australia. As a teenager, he was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, a condition marked by difficulties with social communication and repetitive, obsessive behavior. During questioning, he neither confirmed nor denied his guilt and did not take the events seriously. He described the situation as if he were an outsider watching the horrific crime occur. He was unable to provide details or explain his motives, suggesting it felt as if the actions were not his own. Furthermore, Dante could not specify whether the sexual assault happened before or after the murder. This detail was crucial because, in Western Australia, sexual assault on a deceased person is not classified as a crime. He claimed his intent was to rape Sophia, but he never meant to kill anyone. Sophia's relatives were shocked by the police's negligence and blamed them for allowing the dangerous criminal to remain free. They pointed out that in 2003, investigators ignored crucial evidence that showed Dante was dangerous. If that evidence had been addressed and he had been held accountable, Sophia would not have encountered him in the restroom that day, and she would still be alive. It was revealed that Dante wasn't even listed among the most dangerous criminals prone. However, this was not Dante's second crime. In 2001, while on vacation with his family, Dante was arrested for sexually assaulting a young girl in another country. However, due to insufficient evidence, he was released, and no information about the incident was shared with the local police. Before Sophia's murder, Dante stalked at least 10 other girls. Later, the public began discussing new disturbing information about the murder of another child. This was the infamous case of 2-year-old James Bulger, brutally murdered on February 12, 1993. His mother had briefly left him unattended behind the door of a butcher's shop in a shopping center in Liverpool, UK. She didn't intend to stay long as she was just picking up an order, but there was a mix-up, delaying her return. When she came out, her son was missing. She immediately began searching and called the police. James's body was discovered 2 days later. A train had passed over him, but he had died beforehand. A forensic expert identified 42 injuries on James's body, including 10 skull fractures. Because of the numerous injuries, it was impossible to determine which one caused his death. It was later discovered that James had been noticed by 2 9-year-old boys, John Venables and Robert Thompson, who had skipped school that day. They aimlessly wandered around the shopping center, committing several petty thefts. Upon seeing James, they decided to have some fun with him. They forcibly took him away and brutally assaulted him, hitting him with a 10-kilogram iron bar. They kicked, trampled, and threw bricks and stones at him and poured paint on his face. When they saw James was no longer moving, they dragged him to the railroad tracks and left him to die, hoping to disguise the murder as an accident. The crime was quickly solved thanks to CCTV footage from the shopping center, which showed James being taken away, leading to the arrest of John and Robert. They had previously attempted to kidnap another child in a shopping mall, but the mother quickly intervened and saved the child. It was found that after James left the shopping center, they were seen by 38 people along the way. Passers-by observed they forcefully dragging the child. They claimed that James was their younger brother, and they told others they were taking him to the police station because he was lost. No one intervened in the situation. Investigators suspect the crime was not sexual in nature since the child was not wearing underwear, but the examination could not confirm this for certain. Robert Thompson and John Venables denied any sexual abuse of James but were unable to clearly explain why they undressed the child. John and Robert were sentenced to imprisonment for an indefinite period, meaning they would remain in prison until authorities determined they were no longer a threat to society, with a minimum sentence of 10 years. However, due to public pressure, their minimum sentence was increased to 15 years in July 1994. In 1997, the House of Lords overturned this decision, reducing the minimum sentence back to 10 years. Consequently, they served only 8 years in prison and were released in June 2001. By their release, they had completed secondary and advanced level education. While in prison, they suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, with John frequently experiencing nightmares about James. Importantly, they were given new identities and guaranteed complete anonymity. Any publications revealing their new identities or showing their photographs were officially prohibited. The authorities believed they deserved a second chance at a normal life, and this measure was also taken for their safety, as it was feared that the public might harm them. The public was outraged by the lenient punishment and the protection of their identity. People wanted to know their names and whereabouts to avoid any potential danger. There was skepticism about their ability to reform, which proved justified. On March 2, 2010, John was sent back to prison for storing and distributing explicit photos of children. He received a 2-year sentence and was released in February 2018. Then, he to be charged again. John faced charges for possessing explicit child photos, leading to a 40-month prison sentence. There were reports that he might receive a new identity and undergo plastic surgery at the state's expense to keep his identity hidden, a move James's parents strongly opposed. In July 2019, UK authorities discussed the possibility of relocating him to Canada, Australia, or New Zealand, as maintaining his anonymity in the UK had become too costly. There is almost no information about Robert Thompson. The only known fact is that he was forbidden from communicating with John and was relocated. It is unknown whether he reformed or returned to crime like John. After the murder of Sophia Urudia, many suspected that Dante, who killed Sophia in a restroom, was actually Robert Thompson with a new identity. He received help with relocation and confidentiality, and many details of their biographies matched. Dante lived in Great Britain for 8 years, coinciding with the time of James's murder. In both cases, the victims were found in a shopping center. It is believed there was a sexual motive, and the victims were of a similar age and appearance. However, this theory could not be confirmed. The police denied any connection. The public suspects the denial was due to confidentiality. Many continue to believe they are the same person and consider him very dangerous. The year after Sophia's murder in March, Dante did not plead guilty to any charges. Consequently, the police reduced the charge from premeditated murder to simple murder, which carries a lighter sentence. Additionally, the sexual assault charge was dropped due to the inability to prove it occurred before Sophia's death. This situation highlights the sometimes absurd nature of the Western Australian legal system. Detectives allegedly obtained a confession from Dante, but none of the interrogations were properly recorded, so they could not be used as evidence. At the trial, due to public pressure, Dante was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 13 years. However, he was able to reduce his time on parole. According to the laws at the time of his conviction, Dante was eligible for early release by 2019, with his case reviewed every 3 years. Each time, there is a chance for him to receive a pardon. The next review of Dante's case occurred in 2022, but it was decided to keep him in prison until at least 2025. The family of Sophia and the public hope that Dante, monster, remains incarcerated for life, seeing him as a danger to others. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Kathy Martin. Kathy Martin was born on October 25, 1959, in Houston, Texas, and grew up in a loving family where she was especially close to her sister. In high school, she met Mike, and a few years later, they tied the knot. The couple settled in a quiet Houston suburb where they soon started a family with the birth of their daughter. 3 years later, Kathy became pregnant again, and in early 1987, they welcomed a son. At just 27 years old, Kathy was now a mother of 2. After her second child was born, Kathy dedicated herself to full-time motherhood, focusing on raising her children. Mike worked at his father-in-law's small sign factory, providing a stable income for the family. Kathy's parents also offered financial support, enabling her to devote all her time to the kids. On March 3, 1987, Kathy was at home with the children as usual, while Mike was at work. After his shift ended, he decided to meet up with friends and headed to a bar. Mike attempted to call his wife from a payphone, but she didn't answer, a rare occurrence, as Kathy rarely had the chance to leave the house even for a few minutes. Mike tried calling her several more times, but still got no response. Worried, Mike called their neighbor, Tim, and asked him to check on Kathy. Tim went to their house and knocked on the door, but received no answer. Peering through the living room window, he noticed the TV was on, so he persisted in knocking, but there was only silence. Tim's concern grew that something might have happened to Kathy. Rather than returning home to call Mike or the police, he got in his car and drove around town searching for patrol officers. After a few minutes of driving, he spotted a police car and explained the situation to the officers, requesting they check on Kathy. When the police arrived at the house and received no response to their knock, they tried the door handle and found it unlocked. Upon entering the house, they immediately found Kathy's daughter lying on the living room sofa, unconscious and displaying visible signs of trauma, but still alive. The officers quickly called for an ambulance and continued to inspect the other rooms. In the bedroom, the officers found the younger child in his crib, safe and unharmed. However, in another room, they were met with a gruesome scene. Kathy lay on the floor, bloodied and lifeless. She was naked, and the police quickly determined that she was the victim of a heinous crime. Her hands were bound with a lamp cord, a disturbing indicator of the brutality she had endured. The paramedics rushed Kathy's daughter to the hospital, and the investigators began meticulously examining the crime scene. Kathy's father arrived shortly after, but the police withheld the details of the tragedy from him. Instead, they requested that he go to the hospital to be with his granddaughter when she awoke. As Kathy's father waited at the hospital, he was shocked to learn about his daughter's murder from a news report on TV. Meanwhile, Mike arrived at the house, and the police were immediately struck by his suspicious behavior. Not only did he show up late, but there were also telltale bloodstains on his shirt. The police asked him to surrender his clothes and answer their questions, their scrutiny intensifying with each passing moment. Investigators made several intriguing discoveries. Firstly, they found numerous bloodstains in the bathroom, indicating that the perpetrator had attempted to clean up the crime scene. This suggested that the attacker had lingered in the house for some time rather than fleeing immediately after the murder. Secondly, forensic experts detected no signs of forced entry. All windows and doors, except the front door, were locked, implying that Kathy either let the attacker in voluntarily or they had a key. The police also observed another peculiar detail. All of Kathy's clothes were neatly folded on the floor beside her body. This not only hinted at the possibility of sexual assault, but also seemed strange that the attacker had taken the time to fold her clothes with such care. The detectives hypothesized that the assailant might have threatened to harm her children if she screamed or refused to comply with their demands. Kathy may have acquiesced to their demands solely to protect her children, only to be killed afterwards. Kathy's daughter was fighting for her life after being brutally beaten, likely with bare hands. After several hours in the hospital, she fell into a coma, and her chances of survival remained dire. Medical experts examined Kathy's body and determined that she had suffered 16 stab wounds, primarily in the abdominal area. They also confirmed that she had been sexually assaulted and managed to extract biological material from the perpetrator. However, during that time, DNA analysis was not yet widely used in forensic science, so the experts could only determine the perpetrator's blood type. From the early hours of the investigation, the police zeroed in on the victim's husband, Mike, after noticing suspicious stains on his shirt. They seized his clothing for examination, and Mike's behavior that evening also raised eyebrows. After work, he went out with friends, but instead of going home, he asked a neighbor, Tim, to check on his wife, a tactic detectives had seen before, where a husband committed the murder and created an alibi. The police also uncovered that Mike had a checkered past. Right after high school, he was arrested for selling drugs to an undercover cop and was sentenced to 6 years in prison, although he only served 2 before being released on parole. Later, he married Kathy, but the police needed more evidence to charge him. The detectives also launched an investigation into Tim, the neighbor, whose behavior seemed suspicious. Rather than calling the police from his home, he drove around town searching for patrol officers. A search of Tim's car revealed suspicious stains on the floor mats that resembled blood. Forensic experts determined that Kathy's death had occurred around 10 p.m., approximately 6 hours before her body was discovered. This led the detectives to probe the suspect's whereabouts long before the evening and their actions after the murder. Both Mike and Tim claimed to have been at work, prompting the police to verify their alibis. 2 days after the murder, the hospital contacted the detectives with a breakthrough. Kathy's daughter had suddenly regained consciousness, and her life was no longer in danger. Investigators rushed to interview her, hoping she could provide insight into the events, but the 4-year-old girl had almost completely lost her memory of that day. She vaguely recalled a man with light hair entering their house, though both her father and Tim had dark hair. The detectives received an unexpected update from the lab, forcing them to reassess the case. The experts' analysis revealed that the stains on the neighbor's car mats were mere machine oil, and those on the husband's shirt were just paint. Furthermore, multiple colleagues of Mike and Tim, who worked in different fields, corroborated that the 2 men had been at their workplaces all day and hadn't left until evening. This eliminated both men as suspects, as they hadn't had the opportunity to commit the crime at Kathy's house. The police, who had been convinced of one of the suspects' involvement, found themselves back at the starting point. They refocused on other potential suspects familiar with the victim and capable of entering her house without raising suspicions. As detectives questioned Kathy's relatives and friends, asking who they thought might be responsible, they discovered an intriguing pattern. Many of them, without hesitation, named one person: Greg. Greg, Kathy's brother-in-law, was flagged as a suspect due to his troublesome behavior, which her loved ones revealed she had frequently complained about. According to Kathy, Greg would openly flirt with her and persistently try to persuade her into intimate encounters. Moreover, he would often make inappropriate remarks about her stomach, a detail that aligned with the majority of stab wounds being located in that area. The police investigation uncovered Greg's history of illegal substance abuse and criminal past, prompting detectives to focus on him. They soon found a promising lead: a fingerprint and hair at Kathy's house matching Greg's. However, this evidence was not conclusive, as Greg regularly visited Kathy and her husband, potentially leaving behind the prints and hair prior to the murder. Kathy's parents were convinced of Greg's guilt. Her mother shared a telling anecdote. During a late-night hospital visit with her granddaughter, Greg appeared, causing the girl to glance at her grandmother with an unmistakable look of fear. After hearing this testimony, the detectives summoned Greg for questioning. He categorically denied any involvement in the murder, claiming to have been with a friend at the time, a friend with a notable criminal record. Mid-interrogation, Greg requested a brief absence to pay for additional parking time, allegedly to avoid a ticket, but he never returned to the station. Greg's wife's sister later recounted that on the day of the murder, Greg dropped her off at work around 10:30 a.m. and picked her up at 2:30 p.m., leaving him a 4-hour window that coincided with the time of the murder, providing a plausible opportunity to kill Kathy. Despite these suspicious circumstances, the police still lacked concrete evidence to link Greg to the crime. As a last resort, they decided to analyze the semen sample taken from the victim's body. At the time, forensic experts could only determine the blood type of the sample's owner. The blood type of the sample from Kathy's body matched Greg's, but this finding did not conclusively prove his guilt. Investigators were unable to make an arrest based on the available evidence, prompting a continued search for additional proof. However, despite their efforts, they were ultimately unable to prove Greg's involvement. The case eventually stalled, leaving Kathy's family frustrated and convinced of Greg's guilt, yet powerless to act. Meanwhile, Shelley, Kathy's sister, refused to accept that her husband was capable of such a heinous crime and chose to continue living with him in the years that followed. Detectives revisited the case in 1998, 11 years after the murder, seeking DNA analysis on the remaining semen sample. However, they only got a partial DNA profile, which showed Greg belonged to the 2% of the population matching it. When questioned, Greg changed his story, claiming a consensual relationship with Kathy, but detectives were skeptical, knowing such shifts are common in murder cases. Despite suspicions, they couldn't convict without a full DNA match, and the case went cold again. In 2002, detectives revived the investigation, enlisting the expertise of forensic scientist Catherine Long, a pioneer in DNA research. She and her team aimed to determine whether a perpetrator's DNA could linger on the victim's body after strangulation, and if so, whether it could be extracted for analysis. To test this theory, Catherine and her colleagues simulated strangulation, squeezing each other's necks, and then collected samples from their hands and the neck area. The results were striking. Even brief contact left behind sufficient skin particles for DNA analysis. Detectives re-examined Kathy's case, focusing on the lamp cord used to bind her hands. Since only the killer could have tightened it, they handed it over to Catherine for DNA analysis. Stored in a paper bag, the cord was swabbed from end to end, including blood-stained areas. 2 DNA profiles emerged, Kathy's and Greg's, providing strong evidence that Greg was the killer. 15 years after the murder, the suspect was arrested and denied involvement, claiming a romantic relationship with Kathy. However, DNA evidence led to his trial. While in prison, his cellmate reported that Greg confessed to the crime, boasting about killing Kathy after she resisted his advances and threatening to harm her son if she didn't comply. The detectives were convinced of the cellmate's veracity, given that he couldn't have possibly divined so many crucial details, even if he had carefully read about the case in the news. Empowered by the cellmate's testimony, the detectives confronted Greg, and this time, he finally broke down and confessed. He acknowledged his guilt in Kathy's murder, repeating the same admission he had made to his cellmate. Subsequently, he pleaded guilty in court and was handed a 45-year prison sentence, though he ultimately served only 4 years before succumbing to liver cancer at the age of 56. Kathy's husband, Mike, tragically didn't live to see the day of the killer's arrest, passing away at the age of 45. Her children and parents expressed gratitude to the detectives for finally bringing the case to a close, albeit 15 years later. Throughout that long and arduous wait, they had been almost certain that Greg was the perpetrator, yet they were forced to watch him continue living with their second daughter, powerless to intervene. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Renell Burns. Kiana was born on September 15, 1977, in St. Louis, Missouri. After graduating from Riverview Garden High School, she attended St. Louis Community College in Florissant Valley, where she studied cosmetology. She soon turned her passion into a successful business, opening her own beauty salon, which became popular thanks to her hard work and dedication. Over the next 20 years, Kiana's salon grew to become one of the largest in the St. Louis area, a testament to her persistence and entrepreneurial spirit. However, her personal life was not without its challenges. Despite her success, Kiana struggled to find a suitable partner until she met her future husband, Renell Burns, at the age of 44. Prior to meeting Renell, Kiana had 3 children from previous relationships, whom she loved deeply. Her family and friends describe her as a loving mother, supportive friend, and accomplished businesswoman. Renell Burns was born on May 14, 1975, in St. Louis, Missouri. He graduated from the High School of Fashion in 1994, where he excelled in basketball and competed for a state championship. Renell was driven, ambitious, and passionate about competition, always striving for greatness. Before meeting Kiana, Renell had 2 children from a previous relationship. When they met, they brought together their strong work ethics and ambition, creating a new, happy family. On September 13, 2012, Renell and Kiana got married in a beautiful wedding surrounded by relatives and friends. After the wedding, Kiana discovered a new side of Renell. It turned out that Renell had dedicated his life to Jesus Christ at a young age and wanted to serve the Lord. He began helping anyone he could, including people he met on the street. Renell even created a website where he coached and preached to spread his message. Renell believed that God spoke to him in his early years, instructing him to help others. He interpreted one of these calls to mean that sometimes God chooses to communicate with everyone, and only He can allow certain events to occur in life. Renell pursued his ministry, and his video messages gained immense popularity online. In addition to his impactful work as a church coach, Renell was a financial counselor and insurance agent. He founded Traditional Financial Solutions, a company dedicated to helping people worldwide achieve financial independence. Renell achieved great success in his business and humanitarian efforts, and his speeches drew large crowds. His wife, Kiana, supported him, and together they gained popularity online. Renell was already well established as a leader and coach in the 6-Figure Ambition program, an online initiative for entrepreneurs. He had a substantial following on social media, with over 7,000 fond followers on Instagram and 2,000 subscribers on his educational YouTube channel. By combining their business skills and family values, Renell and Kiana Burns created something remarkable that positively impacted thousands of people. Kiana was a motivational speaker who shared her insights on success at business events. She also had a strong online presence, with 14,000 followers on Instagram, where she posted about her family life and inspiring quotes. In a popular video message, Kiana and her partner appeared dressed in luxury brands, talking about the benefits of entrepreneurship on their lives and those of their thousands of subscribers. The couple emphasized that their goal is to teach their audience how to become successful entrepreneurs and build a solid business foundation. They urged young entrepreneurs to stop wasting their hard-earned money and instead invest it wisely to generate passive income. Their message concluded with the belief that anyone can achieve greatness, not by being great from the start, but by taking the first step towards it. In the Burns family, only Kiana has achieved the success that Renell often talks about. She has worked hard to build and operate a network of salons on her own and was also a successful insurance agent. Her business generated most of the family's income. Renell, on the other hand, focused on projecting an image of wealth, often posting photos of the family in expensive clothes and at fancy restaurants. Meanwhile, the wealthy and successful individuals took action, while poor people were drawn to the Burns family's enticing stories of making big money without effort. Renell received a lot of attention from outsiders because everyone wants to become rich. He eventually founded a company with ambitious six-figure goals, allowing him to continue building his wealth and creating his own legacy, which he frequently boasted about in interviews. The Burns had built a close-knit family unit, and to outsiders it seemed like they were living the perfect life. Renell and Kiana, both successful in their careers, were inspirations to many, and their children, Rhea, Makai, and Ray Haley, were a big part of their lives. However, beneath the surface, trouble was brewing. Renell suggested that Kiana leave her hometown of St. Louis and move to Atlanta, a decision that didn't sit well with her. Despite their 3 children together, Kiana was forced to make the move, as Ronald had plans to expand their business. Kiana put on a brave face and pretended to be happy with the decision, but deep down, she was reluctant to leave St. Louis. On social media, she presented a perfect picture of her life, posting photos of the luxurious gifts she received from Renell, such as a Maserati Levant car and her collection of Louis Vuitton bags. She would accompany these posts with captions expressing her gratitude and admiration for her husband. Like many social media influencers, Kiana also frequently posted about her family and children, painting a rosy picture of her life. Kiana, a woman who appeared to have a perfect life, revealed to her audience that everything wasn't as smooth as it seemed. In reality, she and her partner were on the brink of divorce after moving to Atlanta. This left Kiana alone in a new city, where she had to start from scratch. In a heartfelt video message, Kiana opened up to her subscribers about the challenges she faced when deciding to move and adapt to a new home and people. She emphasized that adjusting to new environments and people without the support of loved ones can be incredibly tough. Kiana also shared her struggles with mental health, expressing concerns about not being strong enough to overcome life's challenges. However, the question remains, was the move to Atlanta the primary reason for the imbalance in her family, or were there other underlying factors at play? In a speech, Kiana refused to mention that the real reason for the problems in their relationship was Ronald's infidelity and promiscuity, which he had kept hidden from their seemingly perfect life on social media. Later that night, Kiana posted a video of herself happily dancing at home with one of her daughters. However, a few hours later, the situation took a tragic turn. Kiana and Ronald got into a long and intense argument, which ended with Kiana grabbing a gun, shooting Renell, and then herself. By the time the police arrived, neighbors had already gathered outside the Burns' home, reporting that they had heard gunshots coming from inside. The investigation initially suggested that Ronald Burns had taken his own life. But the discovery of Kiana's body in the next room with a gun in her hand revealed that she was the one who had made the fatal decision. While it was clear that Kiana had killed her husband, Some people believed that she had been driven to do so after discovering his infidelity. Others thought that the couple's severe debt and Renell's con artist tendencies had led to the tragic event. As people dug deeper into the couple's lives, they uncovered some revealing information from Renell's ex-wife. She disclosed that during their divorce, she had learned that Renell was a habitual cheater and had been reckless with her finances, leading to a ruined credit history and failed jobs. Renell had then met Kiana, a successful career woman who was drawn to his confidence and charisma. Renell, in turn, was attracted to Kiana's wealth, and the two seemed like a winning combination. However, their business ventures ultimately failed, leaving only Kiana's beauty salon intact. Despite this, Renell continued to pretend to be a successful businessman, convincing others of his non-existent achievements. The Burns family presented a false image on social media, showcasing lavish purchases and happy relationships to conceal their severe financial struggles. Renell posted about his business ventures, claiming he could turn any idea into a profitable success. Behind the facade of a devout Christian couple, they shared Bible quotes and scripture in their posts. They flaunted their luxurious lifestyle, posting photos of their homes, parties, and vacations, creating an illusion of wealth. However, this was all a ruse to hide their true circumstances. Unbeknownst to their followers, Renell worked for a fraudulent American marketing insurance company that preyed on middle and lower-income families, exploiting them for financial gain. He even tried to recruit his own family and friends to join the scheme, seeking to boost his status. Despite his efforts, Renell failed to generate enough income from the company and struggled to support himself. The Burns couple pretended to be prosperous entrepreneurs, convincing those around them of their success and even creating a TV show, Meet the Burns, to showcase their supposedly lavish lifestyle. However, their arrogance blinded them to their financial reality, and they spent all their earnings on luxuries, trying to be someone they were not. This reckless spending ultimately led to their downfall and bankruptcy. On December 19, 2019, Kiana and Renell Burns officially filed for bankruptcy and had to sell some of their assets to pay their debts. Despite their financial troubles, Renell and Kiana continued to present a false image of a happy family and successful business. But it became increasingly difficult to maintain this facade in St. Louis. Renell, seeking to further his fraudulent activities, convinced his family to relocation to a larger city. This decision would prove to be yet another mistake. Despite their thriving business being their sole source of income, Kiana reluctantly agreed to the move. However, Kiana struggled to adjust to life in Atlanta. She was already aware of Renell's repeated infidelities and had grown tired of her patient and silent nature. The couple jointly decided to divorce, but in the divorce papers filed on October 10, 2021, Renell deceitfully cited Kiana's infidelity as the reason. Devastated, Kiana understood Renell's motives were to maintain his public image, as their friends and family were unaware of the couple's troubles. Renell sought to conceal the truth from the public, but on October 20th, 10 days after the divorce filing, Kiana publicly addressed a serious matter on live TV, her usual bright smile replaced by a concerned and sorrowful expression. After divorcing his first wife, Renell Burns remarried a successful and wealthy woman named Kiana, adopting the persona of a devout guru to hide his true nature. He continued to exploit his new wife's trust and wealth, pretending to be a successful businessman. However, their seemingly perfect marriage was a facade. On November 9, 2021, Kiana shot and killed her husband Renell before taking her own life. The Sandy Springs Police Department reported that no one else was present at the time of the incident. The tragic event left 8 children without parents. Despite the shocking turn of events, there was no record of domestic violence at their Atlanta home. In the weeks leading up to the incident, Kiana had asked her Facebook friends to pray for her, hinting at deeper struggles. The exact reasons behind her actions remain unknown. It's difficult to judge someone's decisions when they are struggling with depression and other mental health issues. The tragedy is compounded by the fact that 8 children are now left without parents, forced to navigate the world on their own. News of Renell Burns and his wife Kiana's passing has spread quickly through their large social circle. Their deaths have been widely shared on social media, with many friends and acquaintances expressing sadness and sharing stories about the couple. Even those closest to them have paid tribute, although one friend's post revealed that few people knew the truth about the family until the end. Renell Burns was known for flaunting his wealth and success, which often masks insecurity. He became so convinced of his own importance that he lost sight of reality. He ruined the lives of multiple successful women, misleading them with false promises of happiness and success. People like him have no self-respect or dignity. He's a con artist who preyed on his wives, deceiving them with fairy tales of eternal love and happiness. Unfortunately, he was able to manipulate them by playing on their emotions. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Nicholas Billingham. Fiona Beal was a kind and friendly woman who was devoted to her job and adored by her students. She lived with her partner, 42-year-old Nicholas Billingham, in Northampton, a large town in England. Fiona and Nicholas had been together for 17 years and, like many couples, they experienced their share of highs and lows. Leslie, a friend of them, described them as content. Leslie recalled that she had thought Fiona was really nice. Leslie mentioned that they hadn't displayed overt affection but seemed happy. Nicholas's history with women suggested that his relationships were often short-lived. His relationship with Fiona ended abruptly in November 2021, but it wasn't due to the usual reasons. The breakup occurred after they were required to isolate themselves for 10 days. After the breakup, Nicholas maintained contact with his friends and family, revealing to his mother that he had left with a woman named Faye and was happy with his new life. Meanwhile, Fiona completed her 10-day isolation period, recovered, and eventually returned to work. She received supportive messages from her colleagues when she returned to work. However, the split had a lasting impact on her. By the end of February 2022, nearly 4 months after the breakup, her mental health began to decline significantly. The memories of Nicholas in her Northampton home became overwhelming, so she decided to move to Cumbria, a 200-mile distance from her previous home. On March 15, 2022, her family grew concerned after reading her text messages. Their worry prompted them to contact the police. The police found Fiona severely injured in a bath at her Lake District Lodge rental. Officer Josh Parkin testified in court that when he arrived, ominous music was playing from her phone, and he initially thought she was dead. Parkin described the scene, stating that he had found a completely naked female lying in the bath. Music was playing from a mobile phone next to her. He immediately called for an ambulance and suggested they try to get her out of the bath to administer CPR. She then became partially conscious. To check her responsiveness, he had pulled her ear firmly, and she had moaned, trying to turn over. They had sat her up, and she had become emotional. Parkin had discovered a blue leather-bound notebook with a logo on the front. A quick glance had revealed it was a personal document detailing her mental health struggles at the time. Fiona's notebook revealed a dark history of abuse and a sinister plot. She wrote about her husband Nicholas's cruel behavior, including spitting on her and threatening her during intimate contact. She started planning her revenge as Tulip 22, a reckless and ruthless alter ego. Fiona described how she planned and executed the murder, using a knife and an eye mask to carry out the crime. She hid the body in the bathroom and later moved it to the garden, where it was buried under multiple layers of materials. The police initially dismissed Fiona's notebook as ramblings, but upon re-examining it, they found disturbing details that led them to investigate further. They searched Fiona's house and found a blood-stained mattress in the cellar. On March 19th, forensic officers and a cadaver dog discovered Nicholas's remains in the garden, wrapped in carpet and buried under various materials. Fiona's notebook revealed her regret and apology for the crime, but also her anger and hurt towards her husband. The body was found with a sleep mask covering the eyes, bearing the phrase, "This is my morning after" face on the inside. The police spokesman described the scene as showing utter contempt, as the body was wrapped in cables, hose pipes, and plastic bags, mixed with debris from a building. An autopsy was conducted the day after the discovery. The results confirmed that the cause of death was a single stab wound to the right side of the neck, damaging the right jugular vein, esophagus, and trachea. The injury was inflicted with moderate force. Following the investigation, police arrested Fiona Beal on March 22, 2022, charging her with the murder of Nicholas Billingham. Nicholas's family was shocked and heartbroken when they learned of his death, particularly after discovering that Fiona had sent texts to them and Nicholas's friends from his own phone. Following the police investigation into Nicholas' death on November 1, 2021, it was discovered that Fiona attempted to cover her tracks in the days that followed. As part of her plan, Fiona claimed to infection, which would have given her a 10-day period of isolation, during which she would not be disturbed. Fiona's actions during this 10-day period were inconsistent with the severe symptoms she claimed to be experiencing due to the infection. On November 2, with Fiona using Nicholas's Amazon account, and later her own, to purchase various cleaning supplies, including products for Venetian blinds, a new mop and bucket, heavy-duty trash bags, a new mattress, bedding, clothing, wall art, and mirrors. Later that day, Fiona made changes to her order, adding 3 rolls of duct tape to a delivery that already included multiple cleaning products. She also made a separate purchase at 2:19 p.m., buying heavy-duty gardening gloves, a stainless steel digging spade, and a garden incinerator. These items would later be used to dispose of a body. Nearly 2 weeks after Nicholas's death, Fiona went shopping again. On November 13th, supermarket cameras caught her buying various items, including building materials that she would later use to construct a grave. The police released the CCTV footage of this shopping trip. Fiona also impersonated Nicholas by sending texts to his family and friends for several months. She even invited Nicholas's mother to visit her at home. Nicholas's mother, Miss Valentine, reported that Fiona had invited her over for a Christmas drink on December 23, 2021. Unbeknownst to Miss Valentine, her son's body was buried in Fiona's back garden at the time. Fiona Beal appeared to be living a normal life, showing no signs of depression or trauma after the incident. During the trial, Fiona initially denied any wrongdoing but later admitted to taking Nicholas's life, claiming it was an involuntary act. However, the prosecutor disagreed with her account. He presented evidence that Nicholas had been unfaithful to Fiona throughout their 17-year relationship, cheating on her with multiple women. Despite Nicholas's infidelity, Fiona had taken him back on multiple occasions. The prosecutor revealed that one of Nicholas's affairs had resulted in a child. Instead of leaving Nicholas, Fiona allegedly planned and executed murder, carefully considering how to kill him, dispose of his body, and cover her tracks. She also prepared explanations for his disappearance and her own absence from work on the day of the crime. Defense attorney Andrew Wheeler addressed the jury after the prosecution's opening argument, stating that Fiona had struggled with her mental health for years due to Nicholas Billingham's controlling behavior. He emphasized that Fiona, a 49-year-old woman with a good reputation, was a hardworking and well-liked school teacher who had been in a 17-year partnership with the victim. Wheeler asked the jury to consider how someone with Fiona's good character could commit such a crime. Wheeler stressed that the key issue in the case was her state of mind at the time of the killing. Wheeler explained that Fiona had struggled with her mental health for years and suggested that Nicholas Billingham's psychologically dominating behavior had gradually worn her down. Fiona Beal admitted her wrongdoing. She then shared details about her personal life and relationship with Nicholas at Northampton Crown Court. Fiona revealed that she had been prescribed antidepressants during her university years. She described Nicholas as caring and attentive at the start of their relationship, but claimed he gradually changed over time. Fiona alleged that Billingham's behavior became increasingly controlling, particularly when it came to cleaning. She recalled an incident where she had left a cloth with cleaner on it, which stained a worktop. Although it seemed minor at first, cleaning became a major issue throughout their relationship. Instead of laughing off mistakes, Fiona said she would get scolded by Billingham. She also described how meal times became rigid and inflexible, with everything having to be exactly as Nicholas wanted it. Over time, this behavior escalated and continued until the end of their relationship. Even small things, like the way items were placed in cupboards, became a point of contention, with Nicholas insisting that they face outwards. Fiona testified that Nicholas's behavior escalated from joking insults to cruel comments, which made her lose confidence. She also shared that before taking Nicholas's life, she warned him that she would kill him if he ever treated another woman the way he treated her. The judge stated that considering the severity of the crime, he sentenced Fiona to a minimum of 20 years in prison. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Eric Richens. Eric Richens was born on May 13, 1982, and his life had a profound impact on those around him. Eric was a sports enthusiast who actively participated in basketball, baseball, and soccer. He had a particular passion for outdoor activities, especially hunting. His love for the outdoors was evident in the numerous trophies he collected from around the world. Eric was a fun-loving person who lived in Utah and enjoyed exploring the outdoors with his many motorized vehicles. He was also deeply committed to his faith as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. With his family's support, Eric served a 2-year mission in Mexico City, where he became fluent in Spanish. After high school, Eric attended the University of Utah, graduating in 2009 with a degree in international studies and a minor in Spanish. It was during this time that he met Eric Richens, who worked at Home Depot. Eric, who often visited the store for work, developed a friendly relationship with Eric and was drawn to her charm and beauty. However, he was too nervous to approach her directly, so he asked a friend to help him get her contact information. While shopping at Home Depot, a friend of Eric's approached Eric and quietly asked for her phone number, saying that Eric wanted to get to know her better. Eric called Eric and they arranged to meet in person. Eric and Eric clicked immediately when they met. Their connection was real, and their first date marked the start of a wonderful romance. As they met each other's families, their relationship grew even stronger. Eric's family welcomed Eric with open arms, and Eric's family was just as impressed with Eric's kindness and how well she fit in with them. Eric's 2 older sisters, Katie and Amy, were initially cautious of Eric, but they soon grew fond of and accepted Eric. In 2013, Eric and Eric tied the knot in a private ceremony, marking the beginning of their life together. They welcomed their first child, Carter, shortly after. The family continued to grow with the arrival of Ashton and then Weston, completing their happy family portrait. As a father, Eric found his footing quickly. His sons looked up to him and admired everything he did. Eric, in turn, took immense pride in his children's accomplishments, whether it was their academic achievements, sports victories, or creative pursuits. He was always present to support and celebrate their successes. Eric's entrepreneurial spirit led him to start a stonemasonry business, which flourished due to his exceptional craftsmanship and attention to detail. As a result, his business attracted many clients, providing financial security for Eric and his family. Curry was a successful real estate entrepreneur who contributed significantly to the family's income. Her expertise in the local market and business acumen made her a valuable partner in their growing family. She would buy homes, renovate them, and sell them at a profit. The Curry family appeared to have it all, with a lifestyle that seemed perfect on the surface. But beneath this facade, trouble was brewing. On March 4, 2020, the illusion of perfection shattered when Curry called 911 to report that her husband Eric was unresponsive. When paramedics arrived at the scene, they found that Eric had already passed away. Curry was devastated by the news and immediately called her mother, Lisa, who rushed to her side. Curry's brothers, DJ and Ronnie, also joined them, and together they struggled to come to terms with the loss. Earlier that night, Curry had been celebrating a business success with Eric, marking the purchase of a mansion for her real estate company. Before bed, she had made Eric a Moscow Mule, a drink made with ginger beer and vodka. Curry had gone to bed around 9 p.m., but instead of sleeping in her own bed, she had lain down with her 9-year-old son in his room because he was having nightmares. Curry returned to her bedroom around 3 a.m. and found Eric unresponsive. When she touched Eric, she felt that her husband was extremely cold. Realizing that something was wrong, Curry waited for paramedics to arrive and followed the dispatcher's instructions to perform CPR on Eric. Curry claimed to have followed the instructions given to her. However, the paramedics were unsure what caused Eric's death, and the lack of information led them to consider the possibility of an aneurysm, given that Eric was a 39-year-old man with no known medical conditions. Further investigation revealed that Eric had complained of chest pains to Curry the night before he died, which initially strengthened the suspicion of an aneurysm. The autopsy results were unexpected and came as a surprise to all parties involved in the case. It was discovered that Eric died from a fatal dose of fentanyl, a powerful painkiller that can be fatal if overdosed. From the moment Eric died, his family began to suspect that his recreational drug use may have contributed to the fentanyl in his system. Curry explained that Eric used a nightly THC gummy as a way to unwind after a long day. However, the family had concerns about where Eric was getting these gummies. They suspected that Eric wasn't always buying them from trustworthy sources, and that he might have been purchasing them on the street instead. Eric's mother-in-law, Lisa, was particularly worried because Eric had a history of recreational drug use and may have also bought pain pills from street vendors without knowing they might contain fentanyl, unknowingly putting his life at risk. Eric's family strongly rejected the allegations, convinced that something else was responsible and encouraging investigators to consider other possibilities. Meanwhile, Curry struggled to rebuild her life. According to her brother Ronnie, she faced numerous challenges, including the void left by her husband's absence. To manage her grief and comfort her children, Curry found a creative outlet. She self-published a children's book, Are You With Me?, on Amazon, aiming to help kids deal with the loss of a loved one. The book tells the story of a boy missing his deceased father through illustrations and storytelling, allowing Curry to channel her emotions into a positive project. Curry portrayed Eric as a constant, loving presence in her book, watching over their son. Her mother, Lisa, appreciated the book, saying it helped her family cope with their emotions and find some comfort. However, as detectives looked into Eric's death, they suspected foul play was involved. In a shocking twist, Curry was arrested and charged with her husband's murder on May 8, 2023, just weeks after she had publicly shared her grief and promoted her book on local Utah news stations. The community was stunned by the news, struggling to understand the sudden turn of events. Curry, who initially gained public sympathy for her efforts to help children cope with loss, has become embroiled in a devastating scandal. According to court documents, Curry allegedly killed her husband Eric by administering a lethal dose of a poison. Curry intentionally spiked Eric's drink, a Moscow Mule, with a fatal amount of fentanyl on the night of his death. However, Curry's lawyer disputes this, stating that no fentanyl was found on the glassware at their home. Curry denies any involvement in Eric's death, insisting she had no reason to harm him. Curry's mother, Lisa, has expressed shock and confusion over the allegations, maintaining that they was happy and had no issues that would have led Curry to kill Eric. During the investigation, detectives discovered that Curry and Eric's relationship was not as perfect as it appeared. They had their differences, and Curry, a stay-at-home mother, craved independence. She was also annoyed by Eric's frequent hunting trips. Lisa claimed that Eric was having an affair, but his family denied this. They sought counseling, but Eric's family said it was because he loved his sons and wanted to make the marriage work. Eric considered divorce and took steps to protect his assets, secretly setting up a trust with his sister Katie. During the investigation, 6 life insurance policies on Eric were found, totaling $3 million. 2 months prior to his death, Curry had also forged Eric's signature on another policy valued at $100,000. It was also discovered that Curry had been embezzling money from Eric's personal accounts and misusing funds from his business over several years. Curry's financial situation was reportedly dire, despite claims that her house-flipping business was thriving. In reality, the business was millions of dollars in debt. According to Eric's family representative, Curry urgently needed money. A premarital agreement, signed by Curry, revealed that she had waived her claim to Eric's business assets. However, if Eric were to die before her while they were still married, she would inherit the assets. Curry's lawyer denied the claims that her business was in debt. They explained that taking out lines of credit was a normal part of the house flipping business, and that the debt would be paid off when the houses were sold. The lawyer also clarified that the large amount of debt mentioned by the spokesperson was simply a result of normal business transactions. Curry's mother, Lisa, stated that Eric had been very supportive of Curry's business ventures, especially when it came to buying Heringa, where they were celebrating on the night of his death. Heringa was situated on a 10-acre estate in Heber Valley, close to popular ski resorts and Deer Creek Reservoir. Curry discovered a long-abandoned mansion that had been built in 2017. She joined forces with a group of investors to make a substantial offer on the property, using their collective resources to finance the purchase. Her plan was to transform the estate into a popular recreational destination. Although Eric initially seemed to support the purchase, his family later disputed this claim. They recalled that Eric had strongly opposed the idea of buying Heringa and had even argued with Curry about it. The family's spokesperson made a shocking allegation: on the night of Eric's death, Curry had given him a drink spiked with fentanyl. Furthermore, they claimed that this was not the first time Curry had attempted to harm Eric. Eric's family claims Curry tried to harm him twice. First, during a 2019 trip to Greece, they say Curry gave Eric a drink that made him violently ill. Curry's brother Ronnie disputes this, suggesting Eric was taking antibiotics and shouldn't have had liquor. Ronnie says the bartender may have made a mistake, preparing a drink with liquor instead of the virgin drink Eric ordered. A second incident allegedly occurred on Valentine's Day 2022, 1 month before Eric's death. Curry brought Eric a sandwich that caused him to break out in hives and have trouble breathing. The court documents stated that 2 days after Eric's death, Curry punched his sister Amy in the neck and face when she tried to open a safe containing between $125,000 and $165,000 in cash. Curry claimed she was acting in self-defense when she tried to retrieve important documents from a safe. However, she was charged with assault a month after the incident and eventually pleaded no contest. In June 2023, Curry attended a bail hearing, which lasted 4 hours. During the hearing, prosecutors presented 3 witnesses and evidence to support their claim that Curry had poisoned her husband. A cell phone expert testified about Google searches found on Curry's phone, including inquiries about retrieving deleted text messages from an iPhone, whether the FBI could access deleted messages, and the lethal dose of fentanyl. However, Curry's attorney argued that these searches were conducted after her husband's death, as Curry sought information to defend herself against accusations of murder. Prosecutors also contacted the lead detective involved in the case and questioned him about any potential sources that Curry could have used to obtain the drugs that were used to kill Eric. The detective shared information from an interview with Carmen Labor, a woman who claimed to work as a cleaner for Curry's business and home. In early 2022, Carmen told investigators about a conversation she had with Curry. Curry asked her to buy fentanyl for an investor who supposedly had a back injury. Carmen, who had a history of drug-related crimes and was on probation for distributing drugs at the time of the interview, agreed to Curry's request. She said she bought 15 to 30 fentanyl pills and later met with Curry to exchange them for cash. This exchange happened on February 11, 2022, just 3 days before Valentine's Day, when Curry allegedly tried to poison Eric with a sandwich. During the investigation, Carmen told the detective that Curry contacted her again, asking for stronger drugs. This time, Carmen revealed that Curry paid her for the pills with a check. A week after Eric's death, Curry gave Carmen a $1,300 check. However, Curry's lawyer disputed this, suggesting that the check could have been for cleaning services instead of payment for drugs. The detective agreed that this was a possible explanation. Curry's lawyer also questioned Carmen's credibility, pointing out that she was a convicted felon on probation for serious crimes. The lawyer argued that Carmen's history made her an unreliable witness. They claimed that Carmen might have lied about selling the drugs because the detective told her she would face a long prison sentence if she didn't cooperate with the investigation. Curry's lawyer asked if there was any physical evidence to prove that Carmen had bought the drugs. The detective replied that no such evidence existed. Specifically, no text messages were found where Curry directly asked Carmen for drugs. Additionally, no witnesses came forward to confirm that they saw Carmen and Curry exchanging drugs. Eric's sister pleaded with the judge at the bail hearing to keep Curry in custody, sharing the family's trauma and concerns about reliving the horrific circumstances of Eric's death if Curry was released on bail. The judge granted the request and denied Curry bail. However, Curry's family was upset by the decision and worried about her well-being in jail. They felt that her time in custody was affecting her physically and mentally. Curry experienced a health scare in jail after taking prescribed medication. She suffered a seizure and was rushed to the hospital. She claimed that jail officials had given her the wrong medication, leading to severe side effects. Thankfully, Curry recovered after receiving medical treatment. Jail officials found a handwritten letter in Curry's cell after she was hospitalized. The letter was never sent, but it was included in the court records and presented by prosecutors as evidence. They claimed it was written by Curry to her mother and showed her intentions and motivations. Prosecutors asked the court to limit Curry's contact with her mother and brothers in November 2023. The main reason was the letter found in Curry's cell, which prosecutors said was an attempt to influence witnesses. They alleged that in the letter, Curry gave her mother instructions on how her brother Ronnie should behave in court. Curry allegedly asked Ronnie to lie about Eric's behavior during a trip to Mexico. Specifically, Curry wanted Ronnie to falsely testify that Eric had admitted to buying pain pills in Mexico. Curry also told Ronnie to gather text messages from Eric that discussed his drug use. Curry stressed the importance of linking Eric's activities in Mexico to his alleged involvement with drugs. However, Curry claimed that the letter was not an attempt to tamper with a witness, but rather a work of fiction. A judge agreed, stating that the prosecution had failed to prove that Curry was attempting to interfere with the testimony. Currently, Curry and her family are trying to gain custody of their 3 sons, who are living with a relative. Despite being in jail, Curry regularly talks to her children through video calls. Her family attends their public events, but is not allowed private visits with they. Curry faces severe penalties if found guilty of murdering her husband Eric by lacing his drink with fentanyl. She could receive a prison sentence ranging from 25 years to life imprisonment. Moreover, she is dealing with multiple civil lawsuits related to Eric's estate, including disputes over custody of their children. The outcome of these custody battles has significant financial implications, as control of the children grants control over Eric's estate, fueling tensions between Curry's and Eric's families. Curry's trial is expected to begin sometime in 2025. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sarah McClenn. Harold Saskco was born in Titusville, Florida, on September 11, 1961, and later became a resident of Kansas City. His family had 12 siblings, and he was known to be responsible and help his siblings with housework. After college, Harold opened his own pizzeria and expanded his business, opening 2 more restaurants in Lawrence and Topeka. In 1990, he relocated to Lawrence with his then-wife Anna and their 3-year-old daughter Mendez. Following this move, he also launched a 3rd restaurant in the nearby city of Topeka. However, his dedication to his business led to problems in his personal life, causing a rift in his marriage and eventually a divorce. Harold was a respected member of his church and prided himself on being a dedicated man. Those who know him find him to be kind, thoughtful, and meticulous in his management work. However, on January 17, 2014, Harold vanished unexpectedly, leaving behind many unanswered questions surrounding his disappearance. The day started like any other Friday, with the weekend just ahead. People continued to go about their daily business, including the staff at his pizza shop. However, when they arrived at work, they found the restaurant deserted and quiet. Typically, Harold would be there to open the kitchen, but he was nowhere to be found. What's more, no one had heard from him in several days, which was unusual. Concerned for Harold's safety, staff contacted police and asked them to check on him at his home on West 26th Street. Later that day, an officer visited Harold's residence, knocking on the front door and window, but receiving no response. The officer then looked inside and saw a man lying face down on the floor. Police entered the house and confirmed the man was Harold. He was lying in a pool of his own blood and had clearly been dead for several days. Moreover, the scene suggested that Harold's death was no accident. His hands were bound behind his back with zip ties, indicating that someone had intentionally restrained him. His legs were also tied, further suggesting a deliberate act. The most disturbing detail, however, was the deep gash in his throat, which had severed the bone and made survival impossible. The officers were confronted with a gruesome scene. In addition to the ties and the fatal wound, the police found several empty bottles at the opposite end of the room, as well as a phone and laptop that didn't belong to Harold. They also noted that Harold's car was missing from the driveway. One peculiar piece of evidence was the word "freedom" scrawled on the wall in Harold's blood. As the police presence in the Harold's house, this attracted the attention of curious neighbors. The officers decided to use this to their advantage by asking more questions. Through these investigations, that they discovered Harold wasn't living alone. Neighbors reported that he was living with a girl he referred to as his stepdaughter. This information proved crucial for the investigation, as it revealed that there was someone who not only knew Harold well and had regular contact with him but was also likely present at the crime scene. It was eventually confirmed that the stepdaughter was 18-year-old Sarah McClenn, who had been living with Harold for the past 2 years. However, Sarah was missing. This caused the police to become suspicious. Finding her became a top priority, as her disappearance left many unanswered questions. She could have been a victim, witness, suspect, or none of these. It was crucial to locate her. Then police notified Harold's family and friends about the incident. A funeral for Harold was planned for February 8, 3 weeks after the incident. The police asked the public to contact Douglas County forensic investigators with any information about Sarah's location. A $1,000 reward was offered for any information that could help find her. Sarah McClenn was born on July 9, 1994, in Topeka, Kansas. She was raised in a loving family with her parents and 2 siblings. And she had an especially strong bond with her sister. As a child, Sarah was known for being shy and kind. She spent most of her childhood being homeschooled, which limited her social circle to her neighborhood. However, her life took a challenging turn when her parents divorced during her teenage years. This significant change had a profound impact on Sarah, making her more vulnerable. As she adjusted to her new situation, she encountered challenges that made her teenage years even more difficult. After her parents separated, Sarah's previously sheltered life left her vulnerable to people who exploited her innocence. Sadly, she experienced abuse from a neighbor, which altered her personality and behavior. Her mother was deeply concerned about this change because she found it difficult to adapt to the new way of life among them. Sarah started secretly leaving her house at night to spend time with a bad crowd. This led to her frequently using drugs and alcohol to cope with her emotional pain. After her parents' divorce, Sarah, 14, no longer wanted to live at home and found a job at a pizzeria to start a new life. Her manager, Harold, 50, initially seemed kind, but rumors among staff suggested otherwise. He told other managers to only hire young, attractive women. While working at the pizzeria, Sarah's routine consisted of waking up, going to work, spending time there, and returning home. However, she often spent her nights drinking before going back to her family's house. Reports indicate that Sarah was usually sober only at work, but even then, her work efficiency is still not high. Despite frequently showing up drunk and nearly getting fired multiple times, she kept her job, likely because Harold felt sorry for her and knew she needed support. When Sarah turned 15, she experienced another traumatic incident, where a man attacked her and burned her with cigarettes. After that, Sarah's mental health, which was already fragile, deteriorated significantly. She stopped attending work, lost friendships, and fell into a deep depression. Within a year, at just 16 years old, she attempted to end her life. Thankfully, her family found her in time and called for medical help. Following a 5-month hospital stay, Sarah made a full recovery. Upon her hospital discharge, Sarah was touched by the support she received from her loved ones and friends. Among the messages of support she received, one in particular caught her attention, a message from Harold, who used to be her supervisor. Harold offered to be Sarah's confidant, someone she could confide in. He would drive her around, take her out to eat, and listen to her problems. Since Sarah had no one else to turn to, she eventually accepted Harold's help. During one of their outings, Sarah opened up to Harold about her past, sharing her traumatic experiences with men, her drinking, and other struggles. Harold realized that she wanted to move out of her family's house. Upon learning about Sarah's traumas, he suggested she move in with him. Although the offer raised some concerns, Sarah was in a vulnerable state, feeling lost and hurt. Harold's offer provided her with an escape, and at 17 years old, she agreed to live with him. Sarah's life seemed to settle down after she moved in with Hal. She found a new job, away from the pizzeria, and Harold took good care of her. Her dog moved in too, and she even thought about attending college. However, Sarah's mother, Michelle, was not pleased with the situation. She found Harold odd and the whole story suspicious. Whenever Michelle wanted to discuss this issue with Sarah, their conversation would become tense, and they would argue loudly, causing Sarah to distance herself even more. Michelle doubted that Harold's intentions were as pure as he claimed. She worried that Sarah was too naive to see the potential issues. After her parents' divorce, Sarah's father had cut off all contact, leaving a void that she was trying to fill. The situation became even more unsettling when Harold asked Sarah to call him Dad and told their neighbors that she was his stepdaughter. As the news spread, Sarah's colleagues started asking about her relationship with Harold. Sarah would tell them that he was just a friend, but from the outside, it seemed unusual for a 50-year-old man to take in a troubled 18-year-old girl. Her peers likely suspected that something was off. After Sarah turned 18, she felt uneasy as Harold's behavior changed drastically. He started buying her alcohol and illegal drugs, made jokes about them being in a romantic relationship, and even suggested a sexual relationship. Harold kept a record of everything he spent on her, including rent, cosmetics, and substances, in an attempt to make her feel indebted to him. He made it clear that she couldn't leave until she paid him back. As a result, Sarah felt trapped and eventually gave in to Harold's advances, leading to a 10-month period of a sexual relationship with the man she once considered a father figure. They had sex several times a week, and Sarah's only way to cope was to consume alcohol and use substances, further increasing her debt to Harold. Harold's behavior was inconsistent, often criticizing Sarah one moment and complimenting her the next. For instance, he would mock her appearance, specifically her nose, and then offer to pay for plastic surgery, which Sarah, unsure of herself, eventually agreed to. Harold treated her like an object he owned, rather than a person with feelings. He exerted control over her by covering expenses, including $16,000 for dumb implantation and planning to spend another $16,000 on breast implants. These costs would be added to her debt, forcing her to pay him back when she was financially able. Feeling trapped, she felt she had no way to escape this situation. Harold became even more controlling and threatening. He claimed he would not let her escape, which made her mental health problems worse. To cope with her situation, Sarah was prescribed antidepressants. However, this ended up adding to her financial burden, as she also had to pay for the medication. Sarah had reached her breaking point, and her mind was haunted by dark memories of her abusive past and the terrible burden of depression. She often found herself on the brink, struggling to cope. Just when she thought she had found someone she could trust, that person turned out to be an abuser. This was the final blow for Sarah, and she began to act in ways that would transform her from victim to killer. After visiting a pet store, Sarah purchased a rabbit and signed a waiver, then took it home. Later that evening, a manager from Harold's pizzeria visited her house for dinner and drinks. When he opened the refrigerator, he was shocked to find a rabbit carcass instead of beer. Sarah admitted to killing the rabbit and revealed that it was not her first victim. The manager, feeling utterly perplexed by the circumstances, accepted the dinner invitation out of politeness, but left for home afterwards. This was a significant warning sign that hinted at Sarah's potential for violence, but it was overlooked. It was later questioned whether Sarah was truly capable of harming a human being. Initially, Sarah was reported missing. However, as the investigation progressed, she became the prime suspect. Detectives soon discovered that she had packed her belongings, taken the dog, stolen a car, and left town. Although initially believed to be heading to Texas, Sarah changed her plans and went to Florida, drawn by the warmer weather and scenic ocean views. Based on this new information, she was officially declared a wanted person. Sarah was a prime suspect in Harold's murder and considered mentally unstable, posing a threat to others. As a result, she was the subject of a nationwide manhunt that lasted for 11 days, with many officers across the country on the lookout for her. On January 25, 2014, after evading capture for over a week, Sarah McClenn was finally apprehended in Everglades National Park. She was found sleeping in Harold's stolen car with a loaded gun beside her. The police also discovered $2,400 in cash, 2 additional guns, an axe, and several knives, one of which had Harold's blood on it. Following her arrest, Sarah underwent a 3-hour interrogation, during which she confessed to the murder. According to her account, on January 14, 2014, Harold returned home from work and decided to fix the broken sound system. He requested Sarah to bring him a beer, and then another, and another. Harold collapsed to the floor in exhaustion, unaware that Sarah had slipped a large dose of sleeping pills into one of the beers he was drinking. Sarah had already made up her mind that Harold had to be killed. Sarah restrained him with zip ties, grabbed a hunting knife, and slit his throat. As a result, Harold died shortly after. Following the incident, Sarah took a shower, washing off the blood while listening to her favorite music. She then called her workplace, claiming she would be out for a few days due to a family member's passing. Sarah packed her belongings, including a photo of her sister, took the dog, and fled in Harold's stolen car under the cover of night. To avoid detection, she left her cell phone and laptop behind. During the interrogation, Sarah openly discussed her motives. She explained that she had been trapped in the house Harold's, deeply in debt to he sought to control her. As a result, she became his target, suffered abuse, and was eventually treated as his property. Sarah's anger fueled her desire for revenge, and she was willing to face any consequences to achieve it. In her conversations, she revealed a disturbing fascination with violence and admitted to having thoughts of it for 2 years. Additionally, in a disturbing admission, Sarah confessed to killing rabbits simply out of curiosity. Sarah's confessions put her in a precarious situation, as she not only admitted to killing Harold but also took pleasure in violent acts. It became evident that Sarah would have to stand trial. However, her confessions also showed that she was a woman dealing with difficult mental health problems. Therefore, it was necessary for her to undergo a psychological evaluation to better understand her mental state. The evaluation would help identify any underlying psychological disorders, in addition to her newly expressed tendency towards violence and her reports of memory lapses, during which she felt detached from her own mind. After a thorough assessment, Sarah was diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder. As it turned out, Sarah had multiple personalities within her, each representing a different side of her complex character. These included Vanessa, a fierce warrior, Alice, the sensitive and emotional part, and Mila, a feminine, gentle side. However, the most tragic version of them was the unnamed individual who bore the full weight of the trauma and depression. During Sarah's trial, her defense team centered argument around dissociative identity disorder. According to Sarah, one of her alternate personalities, Alice, had suicidal thoughts but was convinced by her other personalities not to harm herself. Instead, they collectively decided that killing Harold was the only solution. The defense team argued that Sarah was in a state of clinical dissociation when she committed the crime, implying that she was not fully in control of her actions. However, the prosecution argued that despite the severity of the abuse Sarah suffered from Harold, the investigation suggested it was consensual. Despite acknowledging the authenticity of Sarah's mental disorder, the judges ultimately found her guilty of murdering Harold. She was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 50 years, a verdict that shocked both Sarah and her family. The sentencing decision raised concerns that the court had not adequately considered the long-term abuse Sarah endured and her mental state at the time of the crime. As a result, many felt that her punishment was disproportionately harsh. In response, Sarah filed an appeal, arguing that the court should have taken her history of abuse into account during the trial. Fortunately, by that time, more evidence of Harold's horrific behavior had come to light. Upon analyzing his computers, detectives discovered a large collection of illegal pornography. Furthermore, another woman reported that Harold had abused her 2 daughters. Considering this new evidence, Sarah's appeal led to a reduced sentence of 25 years, a 50% decrease from the original sentence. Despite this new information, Sarah remains incarcerated. The judge acknowledged that Harold had indeed abused and manipulated Sarah, but emphasized that this did not justify her premeditated murder. Initially, Sarah was a victim of Harold's exploitation. He was a master manipulator, deceiving many in with his charm. Some individuals still recall his generosity, as he had helped employees in financial. Harold's family acknowledges his wrongdoing but also remembers his positive qualities. They believe he needed help, not death. Similarly, Sarah's family agrees that she should face consequences for her actions but thinks the sentence was too severe, given the circumstances of her trying to escape her abuser. Harold was a complex individual, well-liked by many, yet with a darker side. His story shows how life's difficulties, traumatic incidents, and not having enough support can result in very unfortunate consequences. Sarah was abused by someone she trusted, suffered lasting damage to her mental health. However, this trauma does not excuse her intentional killing of another person. Ultimately, Harold's story teaches us to look beyond a person's appearance, as their true nature may be hidden. Harold, perceived as kind and generous, was actually manipulative and predatory. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Jessica Heringa. Jessica Heringa was born on July 16, 1987, in Norton Shores, Michigan, to a humble family, and that included a sister. At 22, she had a son named Zahn with her long-term partner Dakota Quayle Dyer, and by 25, the couple was still together and raising Zahn in a rented home. Jessica worked as a manager at a local Exxon gas station near Lake Michigan, where she was well-liked by customers for her friendly nature. She often worked extra hours to provide for Zahn, and her ambition was evident in her diary entries, which expressed her desire to pursue a college degree in accounting. However, financial constraints prevented her from achieving this goal. Dakota, her partner and the father of her child, was unable to fully support their family, leading to disagreements, and their relationship was strained. Despite being engaged, their wedding plans were repeatedly delayed due to various circumstances. On April 26, 2013, she started the day by shopping at a nearby store around 3 p.m. and then drove to work. Arriving at 4:35 p.m., Jessica began her night shift at the Exxon gas station. As she began her shift, she was the only employee on duty that night. At 11:14 p.m., a customer called 911 to report a strange situation at the Exxon station. He had entered the store to pay for his gas but found no one to take his payment. The store was unattended, with the door open and lights on. The customer informed the dispatcher 911, "The store is empty, but there are 2 cars parked outside, mine and another one. It looks unusual." Police officers arrived at the Exxon gas station about 10 minutes after the call. They inspected the petrol station and found no signs of a struggle or disturbance. Everything was in order. Inside the store, police discovered Jessica's coat and purse, containing $400, and her car and house keys, in the back room. A single drop of Jessica's blood was found near the back door. Police also found a cap from a Walther P22 semi-automatic pistol's laser sight and 2 watch batteries on the floor. The cash register was intact, with all the money still in it. The last transaction was recorded at 10:52 p.m. for a lighter. Unfortunately, the gas station did not have interior surveillance cameras. Jessica's pack of cigarettes was left on the counter next to the cash register, suggesting she had temporarily stepped away. Her car was locked and parked outside, but Jessica was nowhere to be found. She had mysteriously vanished. The police discovered that the gas station was unattended, so they contacted the owner and informed her. The owner then asked a nearby manager to come to the gas station for protection. The police also notified Jessica's family that she was missing. Her parents began searching for clues and called her friends to see if they had any information. One friend reported being at the gas station around 8 to 9 p.m. that day and said everything seemed normal. However, a fellow employee who arrived to close the station shortly after recalled a suspicious incident. Around 11 p.m., the employee and her boyfriend drove by the station on a motorcycle and saw a silver Chrysler Town Country minivan parked near the back door with its door open. They initially thought Jessica might be involved in a theft, so they kept watching. The employee saw a young man with disheveled wavy hair and an orange sweatshirt near the minivan. He repeatedly opened and closed the rear door before driving away. Further investigation revealed a surveillance video from a nearby building showing a silver Chrysler passing the Exxon gas station at 11:02 p.m. The police also spoke to Christian, who reported seeing the man in the minivan talking to Jessica earlier. Christian initially believed the man was just flirting with Jessica because of her attractiveness. A composite sketch of the suspect in Jessica's disappearance was created with the help of Christian, who had seen the man near a minivan. The suspect was described as a young male with light skin, dark wavy hair, a stocky build, and approximately 6 feet tall. 3 days after Jessica went missing, the sketch was released. In spite of, police received many calls, but no information was available that helped the case. A main issue in the investigation was the large number of silver Chrysler minivans in the United States. Specifically, in Michigan, there were 15,000 registered vehicles of the same kind. This made it difficult to identify the driver of the minivan related to Jessica's disappearance. Jessica Heringa's boyfriend, Dakota, was initially suspected in her disappearance due to their frequent arguments. However, Dakota denied this and cooperated with the investigation, stating he was at home with their son on the night of her disappearance. Since Dakota didn't have a car, he couldn't have gone to her workplace, and his phone records confirmed his alibi. After verifying his story, the police excluded him from the list of suspects. Further investigation revealed that Jessica's friendly and outgoing personality helped her attract many admirers. Jess Ammerman, a 37-year-old married plumber, was one such admirer. On the evening of her disappearance, around 9:30 p.m., Jess visited Jessica at the gas station, confessed his feelings, and claimed he was willing to divorce his wife for her. However, Jessica rejected his advances. He then left the station, called his wife, and spoke with her for about 50 minutes before returning home. After undergoing a polygraph test and being interrogated and interviewed along with his wife, the police also cleared Jess Ammerman as a suspect. Rob Fallett, the brother of the manager at the Exxon gas station, where Jessica worked, was initially considered a suspect in her disappearance. Around 9 p.m. on the day she vanished, Rob visited the station and reported that Jessica appeared upset. When he asked her what was wrong, she shared that she was having family problems. Rob offered to let her stay with him, but she declined the offer. Fallett then left to go night fishing in a nearby lake. After investigating Rob's alibi, detectives discovered his phone records supported his claim and he was cleared of the crime. Search and rescue operations for Jessica were launched with helicopters, specially trained dogs, and thorough searches of homes, businesses, wells, wooded areas, and Lake Michigan. However, no leads were found, causing the case to reach a standstill. About a year later, in February 2014, a similar incident occurred in Michigan. A young woman with a similar appearance to Jessica was kidnapped and attacked by a man while walking home late at night. She was taken to his apartment, where she was attacked, and her life was threatened. The woman was eventually released after several hours. The suspect, 42-year-old Brad Allen Mason. Mason was eventually found by police, but he resisted arrest, threatening officers with a fake gun. Then, he was fatally shot during the confrontation. Brad had a history of crime, including being convicted of kidnapping in 2004 and arrested for indecent exposure in 2011. In 2014, he lived in a dorm near the Exxon gas station where Jessica worked. Despite this, investigators couldn't find any evidence linking Mason to Jessica's disappearance. 2 years after Jessica disappeared, a similar incident happened in 2016. A young woman was walking home from a friend's party late at night when she got lost on a dark street. A man in a silver minivan stopped and asked if she was okay, offering to give her a ride. She refused the ride but asked to use his phone. The man agreed, but only if she got into the minivan. Once she was inside, he locked the door, said his phone was dead, and he pulled out his gun, asked her to keep quiet. Then he started driving. The woman was feeling extremely unwell and nauseated, so she asked the driver to roll down the window for her. She quickly took advantage of the opportunity and jumped out of the moving vehicle through the window, running to a nearby house for safety. The driver quickly sped away and escaped. The victim immediately called the police and provided a detailed description of her kidnapper. By examining footage from nearby surveillance cameras, the police were able to identify the license plate number of the vehicle, a silver Chrysler Town & Country. The investigation eventually identified the driver as Jeffrey Willis, 46 years old. Jeffrey Willis, a factory worker, lived a reclusive and humble life, with no criminal record. When police found and searched his minivan, they discovered a semi-automatic Walther P22 pistol. It was discovered that this pistol had been reported stolen by a coworker of Jeffrey some time ago. Jeffrey was arrested and taken into custody. Upon searching his residence, police found a collection of various BDSM items, including handcuffs, chains, ropes, gags, a vibrator, a video camera, and a bullet matching the Walther P22 pistol. They also discovered medical supplies and sedatives, which included insulin syringes with unknown substances and disposable gloves. Investigators found a diagram of the woman's body, with some parts marked. Upon examining his computer, several distressing videos were found, showing scenes of young women being kidnapped. A hidden hard drive discovered in a ventilation duct contained secretly recorded footage of Jeffrey's female neighbors swimming. Furthermore, on his computer, police discovered a folder labeled Victims that included 2 subfolders. The first subfolder was named after missing woman Jessica, and the second subfolder contained information about a murdered woman named Rebecca. Rebecca Blech, a 36-year-old woman who suffered a tragic fate. Approximately 1 year after Jessica went missing, Rebecca was murdered on June 29, 2014. Rebecca had gone out for a run in the evening but never returned home. She was discovered by her neighbors lying on the road, with her clothing disheveled. Initially, it was believed that she had been hit by a car. Although Rebecca was unconscious, she still had a pulse when found. Emergency services were immediately called, but unfortunately, she succumbed to her injuries before she could be saved. Autopsy reports later revealed that Rebecca died from 3 gunshot wounds to her back and head, along with multiple bruises on her wrists and legs. At the time of Rebecca's death, the suspect has not yet been identified. However, 2 years after Jeffrey's arrest, investigators uncovered new evidence linking Rebecca's murder to the handgun found in his small truck. Prosecutors alleged that Jeffrey had attempted to abduct Rebecca and bring her back to his home, but when Rebecca resisted, he shot her and fled the scene. Despite his denial, forensic analysis discovered Rebecca's DNA on a glove found in Jeffrey's residence. As a result, he was convicted of Rebecca's murder and received a life sentence. While serving his sentence, Jeffrey faced additional charges related to the kidnapping of Jessica, despite he consistently denying any involvement in her disappearance. Nonetheless, a review of his phone records revealed that he was present at the Exxon gas station where Jessica was last seen on the night she vanished. He then went to his grandfather's house, about 13 minutes from the station. When police arrived at that house, they discovered something surprising. Although the front door was secured with heavy locking, the police were able to break in easily. What they discovered was disturbing. In the basement, they found a large stash of cleaning supplies, including various powders and bleaches, that had all been manufactured in early 2013, around the same time Jessica disappeared. It was found that Jeffrey had been absent from his job on April 27, 2013, the day after Jessica's disappearance. Colleagues reported that his absence was unusual. When he returned to work a few days later, he had noticeable deep scratches on his face and hands. This has made people who know him suspicious. A woman who visited the gas station on April 25, the evening before Jessica vanished, contacted the police. She had arrived at the station late that evening and expressed her concern to Jessica about being alone at such a late hour. Jessica acknowledged her concern with a nod. At that moment, an unknown man inside the station overheard the conversation and reassured the visitor, saying, "Don't worry, Jessica has customers who look after her." The man then left the gas station. Despite the stranger's reassurance, the visitor remained concerned about Jessica's safety and waited in her car outside until Jessica finished her shift and headed home. Unfortunately, Jessica disappeared the following day. In 2016, the witness positively identified Jeffrey as the unknown man, recalling his presence at the gas station. Further investigation revealed that Jeffrey had frequently visited the Exxon gas station, interacting with Jessica at least 15 times prior to her disappearance. Kevin Blum, a 48-year-old prison guard and Jeffrey's cousin, was arrested. During questioning, Kevin's statements were inconsistent, ultimately leading him to confess. He revealed details about Rebecca's death that were not publicly known at the time, and also admitted to helping Jeffrey hide Jessica's body. Kevin described how, on April 27, the day after Jessica's abduction, Jeffrey invited him to a party at his house. When Kevin arrived, he found Jessica lying lifeless and bound on the floor. Kevin and Jeffrey wrapped Jessica's body in a sheet and drove to a forest, where Jeffrey had already dug a grave. They buried Jessica and then returned home. When the police asked Kevin to take them to the burial site, he had difficulty remembering the exact location. Despite searching the forest for a while, he was unable to pinpoint the spot where they had buried Jessica's body. The trial of Jeffrey began, even though Jessica's body had not been found. The prosecution presented strong evidence to charge Jeffrey with kidnapping and murder. They alleged that he had been stalking Jessica for a long time. On April 26, 2013, Jeffrey allegedly parked near the gas station's entrance, went inside, and hit Jessica on the head with his gun. During the assault, the gun's laser sight cover fell off, and Jessica's blood was flowing to the floor. Jeffrey then allegedly dragged she out through the exit, put her in the back seat of his car, and drove her to his late grandfather's house. Forensic analysis of Jeffrey's devices revealed that he saved photos and news articles about the search for Jessica on his computer. As investigators followed the case, they found that he used a password that included her initials and the date April 27, 2013. This suggests that April 27, 2013, was likely the day she died, one day after her disappearance. Jeffrey maintained his innocence, claiming he was at home on the night Jessica was kidnapped. His lawyers pointed out that there was no direct evidence linking him to the crime, and no DNA evidence belonging to Jessica was found in his home or vehicle. Jeffrey's defense team argued that Jessica had been struggling with serious substance abuse problems in the time before her disappearance, suggesting that her kidnapping might be connected to her involvement in the illicit drug trade. Despite his claims of innocence, Jeffrey was found guilty of murdering Jessica and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Throughout the trial, he showed no remorse for his actions. Willis's cousin, Kevin Blum, was also found guilty of helping to dispose of Jessica's body and received a sentence of 2 years in prison, followed by 5 years of probation. Years after Jeffrey's conviction, new information came to light that implicated him in an older, unsolved case. On October 17, 1996, the body of Angela Thorberg was found in Fruitport, Michigan, with her killer never identified. After further investigation, Ed Blum, a 1988 high school graduate and Kevin Blum's father, was linked to the murder of Angela Thorberg in 1996. However, later evidence suggested that it was Jeffrey who became a suspect in Angela Thorberg's death. It has been 10 years since Jessica went missing, but her body has still not been found. After her disappearance, a court battle took place over the custody of Jessica and Dakota's son, Zon. Jessica's husband, Dakota, sought custody, but ultimately lost the case to Jessica's family. Zon currently lives with his grandparents and relatives on his father's side. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Bluml family. Roger Bluml was born on January 17, 1965, into a lively family with his parents and 7 siblings, 6 brothers and 1 sister. The family was not only large but also close-knit, instilling strong values and a sense of community. Even in high school, Roger was a diligent young man with future ambitions. He started driving his father's truck and, after finishing high school, worked in concrete transportation. Eventually, he realized his true passion was in sales, where he achieved success. His friends often said that he could sell ice to an Eskimo, which showed his amazing sales skills. This talent came with a generous, cheerful, and outgoing personality. He always seemed happy, and nothing pleased him more than making everyone around him smile. Roger had a good life and an excellent relationship with his family. The only thing missing was a partner, and one day he found that too. Although he did not elaborate, a close friend recounted that one evening, when he met a young woman who captivated him, Roger declared with complete determination that she was the woman he was going to marry. Melissa was born in Wichita on January 1, 1960. She grew up in a loving family with 3 girls and 3 boys, though sadly, a younger sister passed away before her first birthday. Melissa was a kind and diligent person, always willing to assist her family and others. She started her career as an accountant at a bank and built a successful path over the years. Her dedication, commitment, and teamwork earned her numerous promotions, eventually becoming vice president of the bank. In 1991, she met her soulmate, and they got married. Life appeared perfect for the Bluml family. Melissa advances in her banking career, while Roger uses his confidence to start his own business. Roger enjoyed spending time with friends and spreading happiness. He found an ideal partner in Melissa. Both shared a strong sense of social responsibility, actively participating in charity, sports, and community events. Although, as we've seen in almost every story, a perfect life doesn't exist, for the Bluml family, the only thing missing was a child to fill their loving home with laughter and joy. Unfortunately, this wish remained out of reach for the couple, and after years of unsuccessful attempts to conceive, Roger and Melissa began considering the idea of adopting a child. To fulfill their goal, they reached out to a local social worker and found out that a woman named Kisha Shaberg had put her 2 sons up for adoption. Her sons are Anthony, a 7-year-old whom everyone calls Tony, and Christopher, a 4-year-old known as Chris. Kisha wanted an open adoption, allowing her to keep in touch with her sons and the adoptive family. However, the Bluml family preferred to adopt the children without maintaining those connections, aiming to provide a fresh start for them away from their difficult past. Roger and Melissa's plan finally worked, and from that moment on, Anthony and Christopher officially became part of the Bluml family, starting to enjoy a life they never imagined. Emotional, Anthony was surprised to be able to have dinner every day. The kids adapted quickly and began to enjoy their new life. They attended elementary school and successfully completed that stage as good students. In high school, they also did well, had no issues with their peers, integrated completely, and formed a large group of friends. Plus, they excelled in sports, especially wrestling and football. Anthony quickly advanced in wrestling, earning second place in a competition in his division. At that time, everything seemed to promise a bright future for the boys and a happy life for the whole family. However, the Bluml family began to fall apart when Anthony was in his senior year of high school. The young man, who had previously behaved admirably, started to change. He became someone who frequently argued with his parents, claiming they always favored his younger brother, Christopher. He began drinking alcohol, ignored curfews, and even smoked marijuana. Life in the Bluml household descended into chaos, and it soon appeared that any hope of the young man getting back on track was lost. For a long time, Anthony dreamed of joining the United States Air Force after high school, but his own actions ended that possibility. In 2013, he was arrested for an unspecified violent act and later, after graduation, for driving under the influence of alcohol. With these incidents on his record, a future in military aviation was no longer possible. Rather than reflecting on his situation, Anthony spiraled further downward. After graduating, his life lacked direction. He didn't want to study or work. All he wanted was to sleep late and spend his days in a haze of cannabis smoke. Melissa was terrified of the boys' angry outbursts, causing her to endure extremely difficult pressure. Adding to the complexity, there was something the Bluml family was unaware of. Since the spring of 2013, Kisha has been in contact with her biological sons through social media. It appeared that Christopher either ignored Kisha's friend request or showed little interest in communicating with his biological mother. In contrast, Anthony promptly accepted the connection and was thrilled to reunite with his real mother. Kisha was heartbroken after giving her sons to the Bluml family, but she found comfort in knowing they were both welcomed into a good home and would stay together. Despite this, she struggled with the lack of contact. Reconnecting with her eldest son filled her with joy, though she also felt deep resentment towards the Bluml family, believing they had turned Christopher against her. However, this resentment was overshadowed by the happiness of reuniting with her firstborn. Moreover, when she heard about Anthony's issues with his adoptive parents, Kisha became hopeful about reuniting with him and quickly invited him to visit her. Meanwhile, at the adoptive family's house, instead of getting better, things were getting worse. The conflict reached a boiling point when one day, during one of his tantrums, Anthony punched a hole in the wall. This was a turning point for the Bluml family. They could no longer risk their own safety or Christopher. After several unsuccessful attempts to stop the eldest son's behavior, Roger and Melissa made the tough decision to tell Anthony he had to leave the house. The young man initially wandered without purpose but soon realized he needed to support himself. He found some jobs at fast food restaurants and supplemented his small income by selling cannabis. Although he slept like a nomad, staying at various friends' houses, he fell in with a group of youths heavily involved in drug abuse. In the midst of these challenging circumstances, a glimmer of hope appeared when Kisha invited him to come live with her in California. Anthony eagerly accepted, and they reunited at Kisha's home in September 2013. He was accompanied by his best friend from high school, Braden, who had dropped out in his junior year to dedicate himself to drug dealing. The two young men were excited because they hoped to get Kisha's support to start a large marijuana business in the area, as she was experienced in the drug trade. They even considered entering the medical cannabis market. In reality, the two young men ended up living in a small one-room apartment. It's easy to see how tensions arose, especially since Sean, Kisha's partner, worked 2 jobs and was the only one providing for 5 people. Kisha contributed only a portion of the social assistance she received for her daughter. Meanwhile, Kisha, Anthony, and Braden spent their days using drugs, and Kisha's younger daughter was constantly exposed to this negative environment. At one point, things became unacceptable when Sean discovered that Anthony and Braden were selling marijuana near their house. He informed them that their actions were unacceptable and dangerous for his as the property owner, and insisted they take their drugs elsewhere. Following this incident, Sean issued an ultimatum to all the house occupants: everyone must find a job or leave the apartment. Instead of urging people to change as he intended, his actions led them to form an alliance and express their indignation towards his. They decided to leave the apartment and stay at a nearby hotel for 2 weeks. However, this was not a viable solution because after those weeks, they lacked the income to continue paying for the hotel. Their need for money didn't lead them to consider honest work. Their first thought was to return to Kansas, likely because Anthony knew the drug trade there well. After nearly a day of traveling, the group chose to stop in Arizona and rest overnight at a hotel. During their stay, Anthony shared a disturbing idea with his companions. He planned to kill his adoptive parents to claim their inheritance. When they arrived in Wichita, they booked a hotel room for a month and focused on planning the details of the affair. The plan was straightforward. They needed to eliminate Roger and Melissa, collect the insurance money, sell their assets, and use the proceeds to start a larger-scale drug operation. Anthony believed that the family he had returned to could become wealthy by growing and selling marijuana. He even suggested the ideal day for the crime: Friday, November 15, 2013, when his brother Christopher would be away at a wrestling event. Anthony, a former star wrestler, had stayed connected with some team members and found out about Christopher's commitment that night. Anthony gradually developed a plan to invite Roger and Melissa out under the pretense of discussing and resolving previous issues. Meanwhile, Braden would take Kisha to their home while it was empty so she could steal valuables. Anthony knows where his foster parents keep money for emergencies. The plan was to make it look like a robbery gone wrong, but from the start, the true intention was for Kisha to end Roger and Melissa's lives when they returned. Everyone initially supported the plan, but later, Braden decided to withdraw. Although he didn't want to be directly involved, he agreed to help by obtaining the necessary guns. Instead, he suggested his friend Andrew, a former high school classmate, to serve as the driver for Kisha to reach the Bluml residence. Braden fulfilled his promise by acquiring 2 pistols from other criminals. It's important to note that there was never any plan to share the money with Andrew. He was promised $11,000 to act mainly as a driver and assist Kisha in the robbery. Ultimately, Kisha was to be in charge. In early November, Kisha shared a photo of herself with Anthony on social media, captioned, "A bond that cannot be broken." Finally, the anticipated day came, Friday, November 15, 2013. As Anthony had expected, his wonderful adoptive parents agreed to meet him without hesitation. The meeting went smoothly. Meanwhile, at the Bluml residence, a different scene unfolded. As soon as Roger and Melissa left for the meeting, Kisha and Andrew broke into the house by forcing open the garage door. They began searching through the house, seizing small valuable items and cash that the couple had kept for emergencies. After completing the first phase of their plan, Kisha and Andrew hid near the secluded house, waiting for Roger and Melissa to return. Shortly after, they received a call from Anthony. Anthony told them that the meeting was over and that his foster parents had left him at a hotel before going home. They didn't have to wait long. When the Bluml vehicle halted in front of the parking gate, 2 attackers emerged from hiding. Kisha quickly positioned herself next to Melissa, while Andrew targeted Roger to keep him still. Melissa, shocked, recognized Kisha as the mother of the children they had adopted over a decade ago to give them love, stability, and a better future. She could only exclaim, "Oh my God, Kisha," before a precise shot to her head caused her to collapse in her seat. Roger, utterly shocked, attempted to help his wife. At that moment, Kisha approached the window and aimed at Roger's head. She pulled the trigger, but the gun jammed. She tried repeatedly to fire while Roger stood frozen beside his wife's lifeless body. Eventually, the gun went off, and Roger fell beside the woman who had been his life's greatest partner. After completing their deadly plan, Kisha and Andrew got into their vehicle and swiftly drove away. The Bluml couple remained there until about 9:15 p.m. when Christopher returned from a meeting and discovered the horrific scene. He quickly called 911, saying he had just come home and found his parents nearly unconscious in their van. He explained that Roger was coughing and Melissa was nodding her head. Both had gunshot wounds to their heads. The dispatcher told him to perform resuscitation attempts while emergency services arrived a few minutes later to take over. Remarkably, the Blumls were still alive, but in critical condition, so they were rushed to a hospital. When they got back to the hotel where they were staying, Kisha seemed to have a panic attack and said she just needed to use an illegal substance, which she did with the other guys. Additionally, around that time, Kisha disposed of the used weapon and a purse containing items she had stolen from the house, so they could be dumped in a nearby stream. Andrew threw the items into a pond in a nearby park. The next day, Anthony used the money he stole from his adoptive parents to start dealing marijuana, earning his first $100. Sadly, that same day, Melissa passed away at the age of 53 after a long battle. Anthony also visited his father in the hospital, unaware that he had been removed from both the Bluml family will and their insurance policies some time earlier. As a result, the two terrible crimes were committed for nothing. In the days that followed, it was discovered that Andrew had not been paid and was unaware that Kisha had taken money from the Bluml family's home. Eventually, they were caught. During the first inspections of the Bluml residence, police noticed the garage door had been forced open and the home was in complete disarray with items scattered everywhere. It was confirmed that money, jewelry, and other items were stolen. Authorities initially thought the attack on the couple happened because they arrived while the thieves were still there. However, it was later determined that the fatal assault occurred before the couple entered the home, so this theory was dismissed. In the van where Roger and Melissa were attacked, investigators found no significant fingerprints, but they did discover a casing. The authorities then focused on the victims' workplaces, suspecting a disgruntled client might have sought revenge, but this theory was dismissed. Next, they decided to speak with people close to the couple. Anthony was first on the detectives' list because he was the last person seen with the victims. However, he insisted he knew nothing about the incident and had not been involved. He claimed that after dinner, he returned directly to the hotel where he was staying with his mother. This was confirmed by the hotel staff. Christopher was second on the list of suspects because he had discovered the bodies. However, he was quickly cleared after confirming that he was at a dinner with the wrestling team during the incident. Despite this, investigators noticed something unusual about his behavior. He didn't seem very upset and appeared deep in thought. When the police asked him who he thought might be responsible for what happened to his parents, Christopher promptly mentioned one person. He said the only person who might have a grudge against his parents and possibly commit such an act was his older brother, Anthony. Thanks to this crucial tip, the authorities caught a lucky break in their search for the culprits. A man reached out to the police to say that a young guy, a friend of Anthony, had approached him wanting to buy a gun. The detectives focused their attention on this person, and upon checking his background, they found he had a long history connected to drugs. They also found out that he had traveled to California with Anthony. The guy in question was Braden. Braden soon received a message from his family letting him know that investigators from the sheriff's office wanted to question him about the incident involving the Blumls. The next morning, Braden went to the police station. A press report revealed that on his way there, he stopped by a pond to discard something, reportedly the guns used in the crime that hadn't been disposed of as intended. According to this report, he was already under surveillance, and when the police searched the water, they found a bag he had thrown in, containing a pistol that hadn't been fired during the attack. Braden's interrogation lasted 3 days. Initially, he insisted he was not involved in the incident. However, under pressure from authorities, he eventually confessed everything he knew, explaining that the plan for the attack was Anthony's idea. Anthony Bluml, 18, and his biological mother Kisha, 35, were arrested on November 19 at the hotel where they were staying. In addition, Andrew, who was also 18, was arrested, followed by Braden's arrest on November 20, 2013. At that time, Kisha did not admit to being involved in the robbery and other crimes, even though the 3 young men confessed to what had happened. On November 25, 2013, the accused first appeared in court via video conference. During this appearance, they were all charged with the same offenses: first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, 2 counts of aggravated robbery, burglary, and theft. The 3 young men were set a bail of $500,000, and for Kisha, the bail was set at $1 million. On December 21, Rogers passed away at the age of 48, joining his beloved Melissa. After his death, the situation worsened for the woman and the 3 young men, as they faced the risk of being charged with capital murder, which could lead to a death penalty sentence. On January 3, 2014, the 4 detainees were officially charged with capital murder, accused of being responsible for the deaths of multiple people in the same incident. Additionally, Kisha was charged with 2 counts of aggravated robbery, 1 count of burglary, and 1 count of theft. The preliminary hearing was held on July 17 of that year. By that time, Braden had negotiated with the authorities and became the prosecution's star witness in exchange for a reduced sentence. After a year of negotiations, not only did Braden reach an agreement, but 2 other individuals involved in the crime also negotiated with the prosecution. According to the agreements, the accused would not contest the charges against them and would waive their right to appeal their sentences. In return, the prosecution agreed not to seek the death penalty and to drop some charges. Starting in mid-2015, each of them confirmed their decision to plead guilty in separate hearings. The judge sentenced Kisha to life in prison without parole for the capital murder charge and an additional 122 months for 2 counts of aggravated robbery. These sentences will be served consecutively. When given the chance to speak, she expressed deep regret for what happened and sympathized with the Bluml family. However, the rest of her statement was controversial, as she claimed she was not involved in the incident and harbored no ill will towards the Blumls. Instead, she expressed great respect for them, acknowledging that they had provided Anthony and Christopher with a wonderful life, for which she remained grateful. Official records indicate that Kisha is still held in a high-security correctional facility. The next to face his fate was his son, Anthony Bluml, known to everyone as Tony, who received the same sentence as his mother. During the sentencing hearing, Anthony, who chose not to speak when given a chance, listened to the victim impact statement made by his aunt, Christina Bluml. She thanked the authorities for delivering justice and spoke about all the love that Roger and Melissa had shown the boy. In complete silence, Anthony listened to Christina's heartfelt words, and at one point, tears almost welled up in the young accused's eyes. Ultimately, the woman informed Anthony that he had made his decisions voluntarily. She suggested that he might eventually understand his choices, or perhaps he never will. Since then, Anthony has been in a correctional facility. Up to now, his record includes numerous infractions, such as smuggling, fighting, unauthorized phone use, explicit sexual activity, theft, and disobedience, among others. A week after those trials, it was Andrew's turn, the only one who refused to admit his responsibility. He was found guilty of first- and second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison plus 155 months. Finally, Braden, the last person involved in the incident, who had made a plea deal with the prosecution from the start, was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 242 years in prison. According to his official record, Braden will have his first chance to be released on May 28, 2035. However, his prison record shows he hasn't reformed, as he has received 71 disciplinary reports for disobedience, threatening others, using stimulants, drunkenness, possession of contraband tobacco, theft, and dangerous smuggling, among other reasons. Ultimately, the district attorney was satisfied with the case's outcome. Although Kisha had given up that option, she unsuccessfully tried to appeal her sentences. The undeniable fact at the conclusion of this story is that the lives of two wonderful people, Roger and Melissa Bluml, ended in a tragic and needless way. The tragedy began with the bitterness or guilt of a woman who lived a life of excess and gave her children up for adoption. She couldn't handle the fact that one of her descendants no longer wanted contact with her. This seemingly caused her to misdirect her anger towards the people who had lovingly cared for her children. Anthony reacted to the couple's love and care with resentment, envy, and violence. He turned to substance abuse and eventually committed 2 crimes. Kisha's younger daughter was placed in foster care. On the other hand, Christopher Bluml overcame the loss, the pain, and with the support of his family, he lived a positive life. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Lilid family. Vidar Lilid was from Bergen, Norway. At just 20 years old, he decided to Florida, USA, to pursue his dreams. As the youngest of 4 children, he had always been a modest homebody, filled with positivity and aspirations of having a wife, children, and a bright future. In February 1989, Vidar married Delfina Zelaya, an American of Honduran descent, whom he met through their mutual involvement in Jehovah's Witnesses. Then, they decided to move to Miami. In 1990, they welcomed their first child, a daughter named Tabitha. However, they soon realized they wanted a quieter life away from the hustle and bustle of Miami, forcing them to seek a more peaceful place to raise their children. Vidar and Delfina found a home on the outskirts of Knoxville, in a suburb called Powell. This typical American suburb offered tranquility, beautiful natural scenery, and a tight-knit community. The young couple was warmly received by the locals, and it felt like their search for a better living environment had finally come to an end, allowing them to enjoy a serene life. In 1995, Vidar and Delfina welcomed their son, Peter. As time passed, they decided to move to a larger home where each family member could have their own room. In 1996, they found the house that was built 50 years earlier, known for its remarkable architectural design, located in the suburbs. Upon moving in, the family quickly began planning for the future. Their first priority was to renovate the old house extensively and build several outbuildings. The couple eagerly started the renovations house, focusing on the guest house. Although the young family was not wealthy and chose the house for its affordability, they were aware of the significant work ahead and were motivated to tackle the difficulty together. Friends and relatives remembered Vidar and Delfina was enthusiastic people, attached to their faith, family, and aspirations. They worked diligently, with Delfina employed at a local restaurant and dedicating her free time to her family. The couple was very religious, and in April 1997, their local congregation organized a special event in a neighboring state for those interested in deepening their faith and learning effective practices. On April 6, 1997, the final day of the meetings, the congregation invited the family to dinner. However, Vidar and Delfina were want to get home because didn't have enough money for the meal. They had already spent most of their savings on the trip and new clothes for the convention. The young couple, along with their children, thanked the congregation for the invitation but chose to celebrate in a smaller setting instead. To commemorate the occasion, Vidar and Delfina planned a picnic on their way back to create a festive atmosphere for the children. They began their journey, but during the drive, their son, Peter, started experiencing a severe headache and complained to his parents. It was already 7:30 p.m., and darkness was approaching. Vidar decided to pull off the highway in Greene County, Tennessee. He parked at a rest stop and took a walk with his son to help him feel better. Meanwhile, Delphina and Tabitha went to the restroom, where they ran into some unfamiliar girls. As they waited at the restroom exit, Peter was already outside with his father, Vidar. After their short walk, the boy felt better, and they waited for Delphina and Tabitha to return so they could have a snack. At that moment, several people noticed them. In Knoxville, a small motel housed a group of young people from Kentucky who had moved into one of the rooms. The group consisted of 6 individuals: 18 years old Natasha Cornett, 17 years old Karen Howell, 20 years old Joseph Reisner, 14 years old Jason Bryant, 19 years old Edward Dean Mullins, and 18 years old Crystal Sturgill. Many of them faced legal issues, had abusive parents, and came from troubled family backgrounds, often dealing with domestic violence and academic struggles. These young people banded together to live and often lived together in a motel, often renting a room for a long period of time. On April 4th, they checked into a motel in Columbus, just days before the incident occurred in Tennessee. Their unusual and daring behavior quickly attracted the attention of the motel staff. They drew pentagrams and other symbols on the walls, feeling liberated and free from the supervision of older generations. This led them to disregard moral and social norms. Initially, their actions seemed to have a connection to occultism and self-harm. At night, candles flickered outside the motel windows. These young people used razors to cut their hands, which was both a protest against their difficult experiences and a silent plea for help that went unnoticed. This group was an attached relationship, with most having endured years of cruelty and oppression, ultimately leading to a series of the tragic incidents. The young people often acted inappropriately and caused big damage to the motel room. They broke furniture and painted on the walls, turning the room into a place resembling a drug den. Some of their actions appeared ritualistic, reflecting their inner turmoil. They actively took part in occult practices linked to Satan, but they sought to push the boundaries further. Psychiatrists who worked with these young people later realized that they were searching for their identity in life. Unfortunately, they had experienced years of abuse and cruelty, leading to a deep-seated resentment towards the world around them. In this environment, violence and bloodshed became common and a way for them to assert power among their peers. It's clear that their minds were not filled with good intentions or kindness. They formed a secretive community that was prepared for more than just drawing pentagrams. They were out for revenge. The most ruthless leader of this group was Natasha Cornett, who stated her intention to start Armageddon and insisted that nothing would stop them. They were resolute in their desire for revenge against the world. Before Natasha, there had been similar confessions, but they were largely overlooked. This lack of attention to her words likely contributed to her extreme actions. Natasha stated that she had been communicating with angels and demons since she was a child. From a young age, she referred to herself as the daughter of Satan and became obsessed with witchcraft, which worsened due to alcohol and drug abuse. In 7th grade, she developed an eating disorder that eventually resulted in her hospitalization in Lexington. Doctors diagnosed her with severe manic-depressive tendencies and a propensity for self-harm and harming others. At 14, she was admitted to a psychiatric hospital for troubled teenagers. The doctors worked hard to help her with her social and family issues, but unfortunately, their efforts did not yield the desired results. At 17, Natasha fell in love and married a man named Stephen Cornett. However, when Stephen realized that Natasha had serious emotional issues and posed a danger to herself and others, he decided to end their relationship. This breakup deeply affected Natasha, who was already struggling with her mental health, and her condition worsened after she moved to New Orleans. There, she suffered a brutal attack by 5 men, which resulted in severe emotional trauma and further deterioration of her mental state. Natasha became obsessed with the movie Natural Born Killers, which features a young couple traveling across America and committing murders. At one point, she threatened her mother with a knife and ran away from home. During this period, she was at her most unstable, posing a genuine threat to herself and those around her. She sought a way to bring her dark fantasies, inspired by the film, to life. After leaving home, Natasha met a group of people who shared the same difficulties as her. Among them was her best friend, Karen Howell, who was also interested in witchcraft. Karen came from a troubled family and had a history of substance abuse and alcohol problems. She often caused disruptions, both at home and elsewhere. During her school years, she witnessed her parents' tumultuous relationship, including violent arguments and physical abuse from her father. Like Natasha, Karen struggled with thoughts of self-harm and attempted to end one's own life 4 times. Karen's behavior was very unstable, making she could not integrate at school because she was often scolded and criticized by her teachers. She changed schools 4 times and eventually ended up being homeschooled. However, being at home with toxic parents only made her situation worse. During this time, she began holding spiritual sessions in an attempt to communicate with demonic beings, which was made worse by regular substance use. Karen became a passenger in a car that was transporting weapons for a gang. Driving the unreliable car was her boyfriend, Joseph Reisner, who was born in Khazar on October 13, 1976. He never knew his biological father and took on his stepfather's surname when the family moved to Georgia. Joseph's parents' relationship deteriorated significantly, leading to their divorce. His mother, Mary, became actively involved in church activities. By then, Joseph had a reputation as a drug user. He started using drugs at the age of 10 and quickly progressed to harder substances. Joseph claimed to have had intimate experiences with 2 nannies who took care of him. His mother remarried when he was 18, but he continued to use illegal drugs, struggling to connect with his peers. He dated Natasha for a while but broke up with her, although they remained friendly. He then began a relationship with Natasha's best friend, Karen. In December, Joseph joined the army, hoping to build a military career. However, he struggled with substance abuse and was discharged. Feeling lost, he decided to leave everything behind and join a group led by Natasha. During this time, Natasha began dating Edward Dean Mullins, who was born on January 26, 1978. Edward came from a reputable family and did not usually have problems with the law. He worked at a grocery store and was very religious, attending church with his family. However, this changed after he met Natasha. She begins to control him, causing his behavior to change in a worrying direction. He stopped attending church and sided with Natasha against his parents, who were trying to help him return to a healthier life. Sadly, Natasha's influence outweighed his mother's concerns. Edward eventually ran away from home and moved into a motel. Their relationship deepened to the point where they began planning a wedding. The youngest member of the group was 14 years old Jason Bryant, born on July 18, 1982, in the small coal mining town of Helia. Despite his age, he had been on the police's radar for some time. His problems began after he using drugs and alcohol. In fact, his struggles started even earlier, as he had a developmental delay discovered in school, with an IQ of only 85. This thing caused emotional and social issues that negatively affected his life. His parents were indifferent to his struggles, and it was only after meeting Natasha that he decided to become part of the group. During this time, he was involved in a rehabilitation program where specialists tried to help him improve his condition. Unfortunately, their efforts were not enough, and he ultimately gave up on trying to change. Jason and Natasha even engaged in drinking each other's blood, believing it to be a demonstration of their deep love, convinced that it would strengthen their connection. On March 13, 1979, in the city of Harold, there was a girl named Crystal Sturgill who excelled in her studies. However, her life changed when she began using substances during high school. Crystal started smoking in the locker room, which frustrated her teachers. More serious issues emerged in December 1996, when Crystal entered adolescence. She began arguing frequently with her parents and isolated herself at home, which eventually led to her filing a police report. Crystal accused her father of long-term abuse and rape. She claimed that this abuse only ceased after she began dating. Her father denied the allegations, calling her a liar. Following a trial, Crystal was placed under the care of social services. Over time, she lived with 13 different foster families before meeting Natasha and joining her group. In fact, Natasha's Armageddon Cornet plan is already starting to become a reality. On April 6th, the group broke into the home of a police officer living nearby. The homeowner was OTV. They successfully entered, stealing pistols of the .&P caliber, 2 boxes of ammunition, and $500 in cash. This marked the beginning of their plot for the apocalypse becoming a reality. Afterward, they returned to Nashville to commence their violent rampage. The group, made up of reckless young people, was traveling in a car that was in poor condition, seemingly on the verge of breaking down. The driver, worried about the car's reliability, was speeding over 30 kilometers per hour above the limit when the police stopped them. They received a fine, but this was just one of many legal issues they would encounter. Ultimately, the 6 Satanists, including Natasha, Edward, Joseph, Jason, Karen, Crystal, armed and prepared, safely reached their destination. They understood that they needed a reliable car to execute their plans. A key task for them was to find an appropriate vehicle, which they planned to steal. They had to move fast before their Chevrolet completely failed. As they continued their journey, prepared for serious crimes, they came across a woman named Delphina Zelaya, who was heading home and had paused at a restroom. While Karen and Natasha went into the restroom, the rest of their group waited in the vehicle. They began discussing their criminal plans and suddenly remembered they had left evidence of their earlier speeding violation. At that moment, they had weapons and money with cartridges in the car, which made them realize they could face serious legal trouble. To avoid getting caught, they decided they needed to change cars. Initially, they considered burning the vehicle. Just then, they spotted Peter and his father, Vidar, as the Lilid family parked nearby. Natasha's group immediately attracted the attention of the Lilid family when they came out of the restroom. Delphina approaches Natasha and Karen, who are wearing multiple layers of clothing. She asked if they believed in God, but they said no. She then offered them a religious brochure, while her friendly husband, Vidar, invited the people in Natasha's group to join their picnic. Natasha's group, identifying as Satanists, saw that the family Lilid had come in a van, which they thought was ideal for their malicious intentions. This sparked a dark plan in the minds of Natasha's group decided to act. They casually joined the family's Lilid meal. Joseph and Jason were the first to approach the table, followed closely by Natasha and Karen. Seizing the opportunity, Joseph slipped away to the car, where Edward and Crystal were waiting. He quietly informed them that it was time to act. Joseph then and people in their group moved stealthily through the parking lot, ensuring no one was watching. Joseph aimed his gun at Vidar, apologized for the situation, and warned that nothing would happen if his family obeyed them. Raised the gun at Vidar, Joseph led him to the minivan. Vidar offered money and a car in exchange for his family release, but Natasha's group insisted on taking all his family to a remote location. They drove the entire family away, with Natasha, Karen, and Jason following closely behind. Joseph remained in his Chevrolet with Edward and Crystal. Vidar was driving the minivan, while one of the kidnappers, armed with a 9mm pistol, kept him under control. The company drove several kilometers before taking a turn onto the first side road they found. After traveling a bit further, they stopped in an isolated area. Holding hands tightly, Lilid family prayed to God for protection from their predicament. Meanwhile, Natasha's group began to discuss their next steps. Natasha hesitated to release Lilid's family for fear they might report them to the police. Vidar and his family were once again offered money in exchange for their freedom, pleading to be released with a promise not to inform the police. Natasha's group argued among themselves, with some advocating for the execution of the entire Lilid family. Jason was against releasing Lilid family, but assured that he would not harm Tabitha and Peter. He persuaded Karen and Natasha to go back to the van where Joseph was waiting. Shortly after, gunfire erupted in the street during the summer. Vidar was shot multiple times. The first bullet struck his eye, followed by 5 shots fired at close range into his chest using 2 pistols stolen from a police officer. The assailant then shot Delfina 8 times, with 2 bullets breaking her femur, 1 hitting her arm, and ultimately, she was shot in the stomach while already on the ground. Both Delfina and Vidar were killed with pistols of different calibers. The medical examiner concluded that 28-year-old Delfina did not die instantly. Instead, it struggled for about 20 minutes after the attack. Unfortunately, Natasha's group did not stop there. They broke their promise and they turned to attack Tabitha and Peter. With Tabitha, they shot her once in the head with a .25 caliber weapon. As for Peter, they fired 2 shots. The first bullet entered behind the right ear and exited through the right eye, while the second shot hit the back and pierced the right lung. This account of incident is based on the testimony of Natasha Cornett, whose story aligns most closely with the evidence. However, she is not considered completely reliable. From the start, Natasha claimed that Jason was responsible for the murders. In contrast, Jason defended himself by stating that he could not commit such acts of cruelty and pointed to Joseph as the actual killer. At that time, Joseph said he was sitting in the van with his eyes closed to avoid seeing what was happening outside. He alleged that all the criminals, including Natasha, Edward, Jason, Karen, and Crystal, were involved in the massacre, but Jason was identified as the scapegoat because he was a minor and could not be tried as an adult. Such a terrible crime could lead to the death penalty. The criminals were caught fairly quickly. A construction worker at a nearby site, who had spent the night in the building, heard gunshots. At first, he thought they were just hunters and ignored them. However, after a disturbing silence, he heard loud laughter, which made him uneasy. He described the laughter as sending shivers down his spine, followed by more gunfire. This combination of frightening sounds raised his suspicions, leading him to call the police. At the crime scene, the police encountered a shocking sight. 4 bodies were piled in a ditch. As officers got closer, they found Delfina in pain, but she died shortly after their arrival. Vidar was already dead, and Tabitha was lying face down on him. Despite her severe gunshot wound, Tabitha was still breathing. When a police officer approached, he found Peter lying there. The boy cried, and the officer stayed with him while immediately calling for medics. The officer comforted Peter by holding his hand until the ambulance came. Tabitha and Peter were then airlifted to a regional hospital where they fought for their lives with the help of doctors. Sadly, 6-year-old Tabitha did not survive. Nearby, an abandoned blue Chevrolet still faintly illuminated the darkness with its headlights. Tire tracks belonging to a family van were also discovered at the scene. A plan was devised to track down the criminals, leading to the blockage of all nearby roads. Police stopped vehicles, focusing on a Chevrolet abandoned by the miners known at the scene of a massacre. Although the car's identification number was found, it had been removed and discarded about a kilometer from the site. The police then contacted Joseph's mother, who had reported him missing 2 days before the incident. She also mentioned Natasha, whom Joseph intended to elope with to Mexico. Their vehicle was detained at the Mexican border, where they had no identification documents. On April 8, around 5 p.m., they arrived at the U.S. border, and their car was checked against a database. It was discovered that the van was stolen and that the individuals might be involved in a triple murder. As a result, the group comprised of Natasha Cornett, Edward Dean Mullins, and Crystal Sturgill was arrested. After being detained, they quickly confessed to stealing the car and admitted to their involvement in the murders. They started telling a ridiculous story claiming that the Lilid family died in an accident, saying they had been run over by a minivan during a U-turn. However, the police were aware that the Lilid family had actually been shot, with gunshot wounds on their arms and legs. There were many conflicting accounts about how these injuries occurred. The judge received multiple requests from the defense to hold separate hearings for each defendant. The lawyers also asked for individual hearings. But all these requests were denied. For older defendants, including Natasha, Edward, Crystal, Joseph, faced the possibility of the death penalty, while Karen and Jason could receive life sentences without the chance of parole. The local community rallied together, demanding the death penalty for these violent criminals. Each hearing attracted a crowd outside the court, chanting for justice. During the interrogations, each person in Natasha's group attempted to blame one another for the crime. Most of them pointed fingers at Jason, citing his young age as a reason for their accusations. However, their accounts were all inconsistent, making it difficult to establish a clear timeline of incident or determine who actually shot Lilid family. This uncertainty has led to ongoing debates, but the judge concluded that each member of the group contributed to the circumstances that resulted in the family's shooting. While not everyone pulled the trigger, all were present during the kidnapping and murder and did nothing to intervene. Despite having the chance to help, but none of them tried to save the Lilid family, resulting in their shared guilt. The hearings commenced in March 1998. By this time, all 6 individuals had, including Natasha, Edward, Crystal, Joseph, Jason, Karen, on their lawyer's advice, pleaded guilty as part of a plea deal with the prosecution. This agreement secured them life sentences without the possibility of parole and allowed them to avoid the death penalty. However, many local residents opposed this thing, calling for the execution of the underage offenders. The 6 individuals are still seeking to have their cases reviewed, arguing that they were too young to fully understand their actions and that they were unable to resist the influence of the others. They continue to deny their involvement and shift blame among themselves. The first person to appeal was the group leader, Natasha, who, along with the others, was denied in 2017. Karen submitted a letter claiming her innocence, stating that she did not participate in the shooting of the Lilid family and did not deserve life imprisonment alongside the actual murderers. She also addressed rumors that their group was a cult and that they arranged the bodies in a cross shape, asserting that these accusations were false and that they were merely a group of troubled teenagers. However, Karen's appeal was also denied because it was impossible to ascertain the level of involvement of each group member in the crime. 2 years old, Peter was the only survivor from Lilid's family. The boy underwent a long recovery process, both mentally and physically, and now wears an eye prosthesis. Later, a custody battle ensued between the Vidar and Delfina families for Peter's care. In the end, he moved to Sweden to live with his aunt. Although he never completely overcame the trauma, he returned to the U.S. as an adult, where he started a family and built a career.